He was about to get married, but his son whispered something that would change everything. Brandon Mitchell adjusted his black tie in front of the mirror. In just a few hours, he would be sealing a new commitment with Vanessa Collins. Only 7 months into their relationship, and they were already taking this big step. "Daddy, Aunt Hannah is asking if you're ready," said Ethan, his 5-year-old son, entering the room dressed in a perfectly pressed light blue shirt. "Tell your aunt I'm almost ready, son," Brandon replied, trying to mask his nerves with a smile. Ethan lingered by the door, watching his father. The boy seemed to want to say something, but hesitated. "Is something wrong, son?" Brandon asked, noticing the little one's unease. "Nothing, Daddy. It's just—" The boy began, but was interrupted by the arrival of Hannah, Brandon's sister. "You two need to hurry. The driver is already waiting downstairs," Hannah said, straightening her brother's tie. "And you, young man, look very handsome in that outfit. You're going to be the best ring bearer." Ethan forced a smile and left the room, leaving Brandon with a slight sense of discomfort. Ever since announcing the wedding, he had noticed subtle changes in his son's behavior. The boy, usually so talkative and cheerful, seemed more withdrawn, especially around Vanessa. Hannah helped her brother with the final touches while sharing her thoughts. "Brandon, don't take this the wrong way, but don't you think everything is moving too fast? You've known Vanessa for such a short time." Brandon sighed. It wasn't the first time he'd heard that comment. "When you know, Hannah. Vanessa brought me back to life. She's exactly what Ethan and I need right now." "And Ethan? He seems hesitant," Hannah observed, always attentive to details. "It's normal. He still misses his mother, but he'll get used to the idea of having Vanessa as his stepmom. She's been trying really hard to win him over." Hannah nodded, not entirely convinced but respecting her brother's decision. "Well then, let's go. You don't keep a bride waiting, especially one as determined as Vanessa Collins." The drive to Westport passed in relative silence. Brandon tried to calm his nerves by mentally reviewing key points of the deal he was about to close with a European investor the following week. As CEO of Mitchell Properties, the company his father had founded and which he had expanded over the last 15 years, Brandon rarely switched off his business mindset, even during important personal moments. Ethan, seated beside him in the back of the black SUV, stared out the window, lost in thoughts that seemed too deep for a 5-year-old. Hannah occasionally tried to start a conversation, but the boy only responded in monosyllables. When they arrived at Vanessa's estate, Brandon was once again impressed by the elegance of the place. The country house, a family heirloom according to her, was a stately colonial-style building surrounded by meticulously maintained gardens. Several luxury cars were already parked at the entrance, indicating that many guests had arrived. "Wow, the decorations are beautiful," Hannah remarked as they entered and saw the white flowers adorning the main hall. Brandon looked around, searching for familiar faces. He spotted some of his business partners, chatting animatedly with people he assumed were Vanessa's friends. The bride had insisted on inviting many of her financial world contacts, arguing it would be good for Brandon's business. Rachel, the wedding planner, approached quickly. "Mr. Mitchell, so glad you're here. Miss Collins is getting ready in the master bedroom. She asked me to let you know everything is under control, and the officiant will arrive in an hour." "Thank you, Rachel. I'll get ready in the room assigned to me." "Little Ethan can stay with me," offered Rachel. "Let's check if his outfit is perfect for the ring ceremony." Ethan looked at his father with pleading eyes, but Brandon, distracted by the arrival of an important client, simply nodded. "Go with Rachel, son. We'll all be together at the ceremony soon." The boy lowered his head and followed the organizer, while Hannah cast a worried glance at her brother. "I'll keep an eye on him," she whispered before following her nephew. Brandon was led to a room on the ground floor that had been prepared for him. Upon entering, he found Victor Collins, Vanessa's father, pouring himself a whiskey. "Brandon, the man of the hour," exclaimed Victor, a 70-year-old man with a jovial demeanor. "Care for a drink to calm your nerves?" "Thank you, Victor, but I'll wait until after the ceremony." Victor shrugged and took a generous sip. "Suit yourself, but I must say, I'm impressed by my daughter's efficiency. 7 months of dating and she's already won you over completely. Vanessa's always been like that, determined to get what she wants." There was something in Victor's tone that made Brandon slightly uneasy, but he chalked it up to pre-wedding nerves. Vanessa is an incredible woman. I'm very happy to have found her. And she's certainly happy to have found you, Victor replied with an enigmatic smile. A successful widower, with a prestigious real estate firm, an adorable son, the whole package. I hope you're referring to my qualities as a person and not just my financial status, Brandon remarked, half joking, half serious. Victor laughed, clapping his future son-in-law on the shoulder. Of course, but let's be honest, Brandon. In the world we live in, people marry for love, but also for convenience. And you and Vanessa make a very convenient couple, don't you think? Before Brandon could respond, the door opened, and Ethan appeared, still wearing that worried expression. "Daddy, can I talk to you?" the boy asked. Victor let out an impatient sigh. "Your son has interesting timing, Brandon. Well, I'll leave you two alone. I should check if my wife isn't criticizing all the floral arrangements." When Victor left, Brandon knelt to be at Ethan's eye level. "What's up, champ?" The boy glanced at the door, making sure they were alone, then leaned in and whispered, "Daddy, I don't want you to marry Aunt Vanessa." Brandon sighed. He'd been expecting this. He'd read plenty of articles about how children could resist their parents' new relationships. "Ethan, we've talked about this. I know you miss Mommy, I do too. But Aunt Vanessa is going to be part of our family now and—" "It's not that, Daddy," the boy interrupted urgently. "I heard her on the phone. She said she's going to send me to Grandma's after the wedding. She said she doesn't want kids getting in your way." Brandon felt his blood run cold. Ethan had an imagination, sure, but he wasn't the type to make up stories like this. "Are you sure about what you heard, son? Maybe you misunderstood." "I'm sure, Daddy," Ethan insisted, his eyes welling up. "She was in her room talking to someone on the phone. I was going to ask to play on the tablet, but when I got to the door I heard her say, 'After the wedding I'll convince Brandon to send the kid to his grandma's. I don't need a child messing up my plans.'" Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers out. Now continuing, Brandon felt a tightness in his chest. On one hand, he didn't want to believe Vanessa was capable of this. On the other hand, he knew his son well enough to be certain he wouldn't lie about something so serious. "Did you tell Aunt Hannah about this?" asked Brandon, trying to stay calm. "I tried, but Aunt Rachel wouldn't let me be alone with her, and then Aunt Vanessa kept watching me the whole time," replied Ethan, looking genuinely frightened. At that moment, the door opened again and Hannah entered, appearing agitated. "Brandon, we need to talk," she said, giving Ethan a meaningful look. "It's important." "Ethan, why don't you go find Uncle Michael? I think he brought some sweets for you," suggested Hannah. The boy hesitated, glancing at his father. "It'll be okay, son. We'll talk more later, all right?" reassured Brandon. When Ethan left, Hannah closed the door and turned to her brother. "You won't believe who just showed up. Melanie Owen." "Who?" "Melanie Owen, Catherine's former secretary. She wasn't on the guest list, I'm sure of it, and she's acting very strangely, asking for you." Brandon frowned. He hadn't seen Melanie since Catherine's funeral over 3 years ago. "What does she want?" "She said she needs to speak with you urgently." "Something about Vanessa." "About Vanessa? Do they know each other?" Hannah shrugged. "Apparently, yes. She said it's very important that you need to know some things before the wedding." A chill ran down Brandon's spine. First, what Ethan overheard, now this. Were these just coincidences, or was there something he wasn't seeing? "Where is she?" he asked, determined to get answers before the ceremony. "In the back garden. She seemed very nervous and didn't want to be seen by the other guests." Brandon hurried out, crossing the main hall where guests were beginning to gather. He caught a glimpse of Vanessa, still in her silk robe, giving instructions to one of the waiters. She looked so in control, so confident, the image of the successful executive who had drawn him in from the start. In the back garden, he found Melanie sitting on a stone bench, visibly anxious. When she saw him, she stood immediately. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm sorry to show up like this, uninvited. I know it's intrusive, but what do you know about Vanessa, Melanie?" he cut in, getting straight to the point. Melanie sighed, seeming relieved not to have to dance around it. "Vanessa Collins worked at the same company as Mrs. Catherine before she Before the incident, they weren't just colleagues, they were rivals. Vanessa was fired after trying to sabotage one of Mrs. Catherine's projects. Brandon's stomach dropped. How had he not known this? Why had Vanessa never mentioned knowing Catherine? "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he demanded, anger rising. "I tried, Mr. Mitchell. I called your office several times over the past few months, ever since I heard about the engagement. Your secretary said you were busy and never returned my calls," Melanie explained, wringing her hands. "Then I started getting anonymous calls threatening me, telling me to stay out of it." "Threats? That's outrageous." "I have the recordings. On my phone, I couldn't prove who made the calls, but—" She hesitated. "There's more." "More?" Brandon could barely process it. Vanessa was always obsessed with Mrs. Catherine's success. She envied everything, her work, her recognition, and you. There was a corporate event years ago where she tried to, well, seduce you, but you didn't even notice. You were completely in love with Mrs. Catherine. Memories began flooding. Back. A corporate cocktail party. A persistent blonde woman he'd barely registered. So focused was he on Catherine, 4 months pregnant at the time. "That woman was Vanessa?" he asked, stunned. "Yes, and after she found out about Mrs. Catherine's passing, she started monitoring you on social media. That was when you two accidentally met at that real estate developers conference in Providence, wasn't it?" Brandon felt the world spin. The seemingly chance encounter in the hotel lobby, the easy conversation, the sudden connection he felt. Had it all been planned? Before he could fully process that thought, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Hannah. "Come quick, problem with Ethan." "I have to go," he told Melanie, "but I want to talk more later. Don't leave." Rushing back to the house, Brandon found a small commotion near Vanessa's office. Hannah was holding Ethan's hand, while his fiancée, still in her robe, gestured angrily. "What's going on?" Brandon asked as he approached. "Your son was going through my private things," Vanessa accused, her tone colder than he'd ever heard before, almost venomous. "I was just looking for my remote control car, Aunt Vanessa." Ethan defended himself, his voice trembling. "You said you'd keep it safe for me." "On my laptop? Is that what you're going to tell your father? That you were looking for a toy on my computer?" Vanessa shot back, forcing a smile as she noticed some guests starting to watch the scene. Hannah lightly squeezed Brandon's shoulder. "Brandon, I think you need to see what Ethan found," she whispered. Vanessa caught the comment, and her face momentarily paled before she composed herself. "Darling, we're less than an hour away from our wedding. Any family drama can wait, don't you think?" she said, slipping back into the sweet tone he knew so well. "Besides, we have important guests. That German investor you wanted to impress just arrived." "We need to talk in private, Vanessa," Brandon insisted, keeping his voice low. Now, realizing she had no choice, Vanessa forced a smile for the nearby guests and followed Brandon into a small adjacent room. Hannah and Ethan trailed close behind. "What is the meaning of this?" Vanessa demanded, as soon as the door closed. "Your son invades my privacy on our wedding day and you're taking his side. He's clearly jealous, Brandon. I thought we were past this." "Ethan, show your dad what you found," Hannah said, ignoring Vanessa's protests. The boy took his aunt's phone and showed the screen to his father. It was a photo of Vanessa's laptop screen, displaying a document titled Post-Wedding Plan. Brandon took the phone and zoomed in to read, "Phase 1, secure position as wife, first 3 months. Show total devotion to Brandon, suggest transferring Ethan to boarding school or his grandmother's. House, begin integrating into company decisions. Phase 2, establish financial influence, months, 3, 6. Obtain power of attorney for bank transactions. Propose merging joint accounts. Initiate gradual transfer of assets to joint ownership. Phase 3, consolidation and control, 6 to 12 months. Remove negative influences, Michael's wife Hannah. Secure a seat on the company board, lay groundwork for a favorable divorce if necessary." Brandon looked up from the phone, staring at Vanessa. Her face had completely changed, the sweet smile replaced by a hard, calculating expression. "This isn't what it looks like," she began, but without much conviction. "No? Then explain it to me, Vanessa. Explain why you never mentioned knowing Catherine, that you worked together. Explain why you have a detailed plan to get rid of my son and take control of my assets." Vanessa glanced around like a cornered animal before letting out a dry laugh. "Did you really think I fell for a widower with a young son? Please, Brandon, I thought you were smarter than that. You were the perfect husband for Catherine, not for me. But your resources, your company, that's what interests me." "How could you?" Brandon could hardly believe what he was hearing. "All this time, it was easier than I thought," Vanessa continued, no longer bothering to hide her true nature. "You were so needy, so desperate for company after 3 years alone. All it took was showing a little interest in your precious son, and you fell for it like a duck to water." Hannah pulled Ethan close protectively, shocked by the woman's transformation before them. "Get out of my house," Brandon demanded, trembling with anger. Vanessa laughed again. "Your house, this is my house, darling. And if you humiliate me by calling off this wedding, I'll use every connection I have to destroy your reputation and your business. Believe me, I have plenty of material for that." "What kind of material?" Brandon challenged. "That land in Bridgeport you bought below market value? I have fabricated proof you bribed inspectors. Your dealings with Chinese investors? I can make it look like money laundering. I prepared well, Brandon. Very well." At that moment, the door opened and Victor Collins walked in, looking annoyed. "What's going on here? The guests are waiting. The officiant has arrived." "Ask your daughter, Victor," Brandon replied coldly. "Ask her about her plan to manipulate me and steal my company." Victor looked at Vanessa, who remained composed. "Dad, Brandon's just having a little pre-wedding nerves, and his son made up stories about me. Nothing we can't sort out after the ceremony." "There won't be a ceremony," Brandon declared. "It's over, Vanessa." Victor stepped closer, his expression eerily similar to his daughter's. "Brandon, be reasonable. We have important people out there. A scandal won't be good for anyone, especially you and your business." "You knew?" Brandon asked, realizing the complicity between father and daughter. "You knew about her plan?" Victor shrugged. "Business is business, my dear. My daughter deserves the best, and your company would be an excellent addition to our family portfolio." Brandon couldn't believe what he was hearing. How had he been so blind? How had he missed what was happening right under his nose? "I'm leaving now, with my son and my sister," he announced. "You can tell the guests whatever you want." "Think carefully, Brandon," Vanessa threatened. "If you walk out that door tomorrow, I'll start tearing down everything you've built." Hannah, who had been silently watching, finally spoke. "Your plan's over, Vanessa. I recorded this whole conversation on my phone." Vanessa's face paled. "You can't do that." "Too late," Hannah replied, holding up her phone. "And if anything happens to my brother's company, or if any false rumors start circulating, this recording will go to every business newspaper in the country." Victor and Vanessa exchanged uneasy glances. The tables had turned against them. "This isn't over," Vanessa hissed as they left the room. Walking through the main hall, curious guests stared. Brandon kept his head high, holding Ethan's hand, while Hannah followed closely. As they passed through the front door, they heard the murmurs growing behind them. In the car, already on the way to New York City, Brandon finally let his tears fall as he hugged his son. "I'm sorry, Dad," Ethan said, crying too. "I just wanted to help." "You have nothing to apologize for, son. You saved us today." "You saved our family," Brandon replied, kissing the top of the boy's head. "What do we do now?" Hannah asked, worried about Vanessa's threats. "We go home, and tomorrow we start over. I have the recording. I'll consult our lawyers. I won't let her hurt us." Ethan hugged his father tightly. "Everything will be okay, right, Dad?" "Of course, champ. It's just the two of us again now, and Aunt Hannah, of course," he added, smiling at his sister. What Brandon Mitchell didn't know was that despite the recording, Vanessa Collins wouldn't give up so easily. In the coming weeks, he would face challenges he'd never imagined and uncover even darker truths about the woman he'd nearly married. But he'd also find unexpected support and perhaps a real chance to rebuild his life. Victor Collins watched Brandon's car disappear down the dirt road leading away from the property. Beside him, Vanessa didn't look defeated. There was a calculated gleam in her eyes. "What should we tell the guests?" he asked. "Say I had a nervous breakdown, that the wedding is postponed, not cancelled," Vanessa replied, determination in her voice. That'll buy me time to execute plan B. He has the recording, Vanessa. He has the upper hand. For now, Vanessa said with a cold smile. For now. Meanwhile, in the car heading back to New York City, Brandon looked down at his sleeping son in his lap and felt a mix of gratitude and unease. He'd escaped a trap, but something told him the battle was only beginning. The next morning, life in the Upper East Side apartment tried to return to normal. Hannah had spent the night in the guest room to support her brother and nephew. Brandon woke up early, as usual, but instead of preparing for the office, he sat on the balcony with a cup of coffee watching the city wake. Couldn't sleep, Hannah asked, joining him. I kept thinking about how naive I was. I should have seen her intentions. Don't blame yourself. Vanessa is clearly manipulative and very good at what she does. Anyone could have fallen into her trap. But I should have noticed the signs. Her sudden interest in the company, the questions about my investments, rushing the wedding. Brandon sighed, running a hand through his hair. And Ethan tried to warn me in his own way. I noticed he was uncomfortable around her, but I thought it was just jealousy. What matters is you found out before it was too late. Now we need to focus on protecting you, Ethan, and the company. Brandon nodded, taking a sip of coffee. I already called Dr. Morrison. We're meeting at the office at 10. I want him to hear the recording and advise me on next steps. Good morning. Dad, good morning, Aunt Hannah, Ethan exclaimed, stepping onto the balcony in his superhero pajamas. The boy seemed lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from his small shoulders. Good morning, champ. Sleep well? Brandon asked, opening his arms for a hug. Yeah, I dreamed we had a huge dog that scared away the bad people, the boy said excitedly. Hannah and Brandon exchanged a glance. How about breakfast, then a trip to the park? Hannah suggested. It's been ages since we went to Central Park. Yay! Ethan cheered. Can I bring my new bike? Of course, Brandon replied. But first, I need to handle a few things at the office. Aunt Hannah will stay with you this morning, and we'll meet for lunch, okay? The boy agreed, thrilled at the idea of a day at the park. After breakfast, Brandon got ready for the office. Before leaving, he checked his phone and saw over 30 missed calls and dozens of messages, many from confused guests from the day, before some from partners demanding explanations, and several from unknown numbers. One message in particular caught his attention. It was from Michael Mitchell, his cousin and minority partner at Mitchell Properties. We need to talk urgently. Vanessa reached out to investors. Situation's complicated. Brandon's stomach dropped. So Vanessa had already begun her retaliation. When Brandon arrived at the Mitchell Properties office on the 20th floor of a modern commercial building, on Fifth Avenue, he was met with curious glances. Clearly, news of the cancelled wedding had already spread. His secretary, Deborah, a 60-year-old woman who had worked with the Mitchell family since Brandon's father's time, approached with obvious concern. Mr. Brandon, Dr. Morrison, and Mr. Michael are already in the conference room and... She hesitated. Miss Collins has called 6 times since I arrived. Thank you, Deborah. Please don't put any of her calls through, and if she shows up in person, don't let her in. Deborah nodded without asking questions, but her eyes conveyed understanding. She had never liked Vanessa. In the conference room, Brandon found his lawyer, Richard Morrison, and his cousin, Michael, both with grave expressions. Bran, glad you're here, Michael said, standing to shake his cousin's hand. We've been assessing the situation. What exactly happened? Richard asked, cutting to the chase. Brandon recounted the events of the previous day, from Ethan's revelation to the confrontation with Vanessa and Victor. Finally, he played the recording Hannah had made. This is clearly an attempt at fraud, Richard concluded, after hearing everything. We have enough evidence to sue Vanessa if she tries anything against you or the company. The problem is, she's already started, Michael interjected, rubbing his tired face. Last night, I got calls from 3 major investors, all cancelling meetings scheduled for next week. One of them mentioned hearing rumors about financial trouble at Mitchell Properties. That's ridiculous. We're more stable than ever, Brandon protested. Yes, but you know how the market works. A few rumors are enough to scare investors, Michael replied. And there's more. The federal bank apparently received An anonymous tip about possible irregularities in the Vertical Gardens project. Brandon paled. The Vertical Gardens project was the company's biggest development at the moment, a sustainable residential complex attracting international attention. "She's playing dirty," Richard remarked, "but we can fight back. I'll prepare a lawsuit for defamation and attempted fraud. With the recording, we have a strong case. Meanwhile, we need damage control," Michael added. "Talk to investors, reassure them, show our financial stability." Brandon nodded, trying to gather his thoughts. How had a woman he thought he loved turned into his worst enemy overnight? "There's one more thing," Michael said, sounding hesitant. "I think we should consider temporarily stepping you down as president." "What?" Brandon couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Just as a precaution," Michael quickly explained. "If Vanessa spreads serious rumors, shareholders will get nervous. It would be better for you to step aside voluntarily while we handle this, to show transparency. I'd take over in the interim." Something in Michael's tone made Brandon uneasy. Was his own cousin trying to take advantage of the situation? "I think that's premature," Richard countered. "Let's first see how things unfold." The meeting continued for another hour, discussing strategies and possible scenarios. By the end, Brandon was emotionally drained but determined to protect his assets and, most importantly, his son, from any threat. As he left the conference room, Deborah discreetly called to him. "Mr. Brandon, there's a young lady waiting to speak with you. She said it's important." "Who is it?" he asked wearily. "Jennifer Brooks. She said she's a landscape designer and worked at Miss Collins' country house." Intrigued, Brandon agreed to see her. In the waiting room, he found a young woman around 30 years old, dressed simply with curly hair tied up in a casual bun. She stood up nervously as he approached. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm sorry to bother you at work. I tried calling, but—" "It's all right, Miss Brooks. My secretary mentioned you worked for Vanessa Collins." "Yes, I tended to the gardens at the country house for almost 2 years, but I was fired yesterday right after the wedding was called off." Brandon invited her into his private office, curious about what she had to say. "Why were you let go?" he asked as soon as they sat down. "Officially, budget cuts, but really, it was because I questioned Miss Collins about—" She hesitated, seeming unsure whether to continue. "About?" "About her plans for your son. I overheard a conversation between her and her father. They were discussing how to convince you to send the boy to boarding school after the wedding. I thought that was wrong. Your son is such a sweet child, Mr. Mitchell. The few times I saw him, when you brought him to the country house—" Brandon felt a wave of gratitude for this woman who cared about Ethan, without even knowing him well. "Why are you telling me this now?" Jennifer took a deep breath before answering. "Because I know Miss Collins won't stop. She's not the type to accept defeat, and I'm afraid of what she might do." "Do you know something specific?" "Last night, after firing me, she made several calls. I heard parts while gathering. My things. She was contacting people at banks, rival construction firms, even government offices. And also—" Jennifer seemed even more nervous. "I heard her mention your son. Something about using the situation to question your fitness as a father." Brandon's blood ran cold. Attacking his business was one thing, but threatening his relationship with Ethan was entirely different. "Thank you for warning me, Miss Brooks. This is disturbing, but very helpful." "There's one more thing," Jennifer continued, rummaging in her bag. "While working in the gardens, I found this buried near the pool house." She handed Brandon a small black flash drive. "I don't know what's on it, but it was in a box with your name. I thought it was strange, so I kept it." Brandon took the flash drive, intrigued. What could it be? And why was it buried on Vanessa's property? "Thank you very much, Miss Brooks. I should check this right away." "Just be careful, Mr. Mitchell. Vanessa Collins may seem polished and controlled, but I've seen her lose her composure. She can be unpredictable." After Jennifer left, Brandon plugged the flash drive into his computer, carefully using an isolated system for safety. What he found left him stunned. Detailed documents about him and his family, including financial information that should have been confidential, photos of Ethan taken without his knowledge, and an audio file labeled Catherine. With trembling hands, he clicked on the file. The voice of his late wife filled the room in a recording apparently made shortly before her passing. "Brandon, if you're hearing this, something happened to me before I could tell you in person. I've been getting threats from Vanessa Collins, her former colleague. She blames my professional success for her failure and swore revenge. I have proof she forged documents to harm me. Everything is here. Please, be careful. Protect our Ethan. I love you." Brandon felt as if the air had been sucked from his lungs. Vanessa's obsession with his family went back much further, to when Catherine was still alive. What else had she done? How far would her vengeance go? With shaking hands, he picked up the phone and called Richard Morrison. They needed to act fast. "Richard, I found something that changes everything. Come to the office immediately and bring your contact at the Federal Bureau of Investigation." While waiting, Brandon called Hannah. "How's Ethan?" he asked, unable to hide the worry in his voice. "He's fine, we just got to the park. He's riding his bike now," replied Hannah, sensing her brother's tension. "Did something happen? Vanessa is more dangerous than we thought. Don't leave the park and don't let Ethan out of your sight for even a second. I'll send security to you right away. Brandon, you're scaring me. I'll explain everything later. Just stay alert." Hanging up the phone, Brandon looked again at the flash drive that held not only the key to understanding the past, but possibly the only weapon he had against the threat Vanessa posed to his future and Ethan's. In Central Park, Hannah watched Ethan riding his bike along one of the paths, closely followed by a private security guard Brandon had sent. The day was sunny, and the boy seemed happy, oblivious to the adults' concerns around him. "Aunt Hannah, look what I can do," Ethan shouted, lifting his feet off the pedals and balancing for a few seconds. "Very good, sweetheart. But—" "Be careful," Hannah replied, forcing a smile despite her growing anxiety. That's when she noticed a man in a dark suit photographing Ethan from a distance. The security guard noticed too and immediately stepped between the photographer and the boy. "Who are you? And why are you taking pictures of the child?" demanded the guard, moving closer. The man quickly put away his camera and tried to walk away, but the guard caught up, grabbing his arm. "I'm just a freelance photographer," the man explained, visibly nervous. "I'm taking pictures for a city parks catalog." "Then why are you specifically photographing that child?" the guard questioned, suspicious. Before the man could answer, his phone rang. He answered quickly, listened, then looked at Hannah and Ethan with a strange expression. "Tell Brandon Mitchell this is only the beginning," the man said before breaking free and running out of the park. The guard tried to follow, but the man got into a waiting car and sped off. Alarmed, Hannah called Ethan over to her. "What happened, Auntie? Why was that man running?" the boy asked, curious. "Nothing important, sweetheart, but I think it's time we go have lunch with Daddy," she replied, trying to stay calm as she sent an urgent message to Brandon. "Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us as we're just starting out." Now continuing, at the Mitchell Properties office, Brandon, Richard and Chief Robert Carter reviewed the documents found on the flash drive. "This is extremely serious," commented the chief, a middle-aged man with a stern expression. "We have evidence of corporate espionage, threats, document forgery. Vanessa Collins could face serious criminal charges. The problem is she has powerful connections," Richard noted. "Her father, Victor Collins, has friends in high government positions." Brandon's phone buzzed with Hannah's message, and his face paled as he read it. "We need to act now," he said, showing the message to the chief. "They're following my son." Chief Carter nodded gravely. "I'll issue a restraining order immediately and launch a formal investigation. But you need to take extra precautions. If Vanessa is as obsessed as she seems, she won't stop easily." "I'll take Ethan and Hannah to our beach house in Montauk," Brandon decided. "It's a discreet place. Very few people know about it." "Good idea," agreed Richard. "In the meantime, we'll keep working on the legal process and protecting the company." Just as Brandon was about to leave to meet Hannah and Ethan, Deborah hurried into the room. "Mr. Mitchell, Miss Collins is here. She says if you don't see her, she'll make a scene in the lobby." Brandon exchanged a glance with Chief Carter, who gave a subtle nod. "Let her in," Brandon authorized, "but stay close, Deborah. If she starts shouting or causing trouble, call security." Minutes later, Vanessa entered the room, elegantly dressed as always, but with dark circles faintly visible beneath her flawless makeup. Her icy smile froze when she saw the chief. "I didn't know we'd have company, darling," she remarked, quickly regaining her composure. "This is Chief Robert Carter from the Federal Bureau of Investigation," Brandon introduced. "We were just discussing the evidence I found regarding your illegal activities, Vanessa." Vanessa's smile wavered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "What evidence? What are you talking about?" Brandon turned on the room's monitor, displaying the files from the flash drive. "I know about your obsession with Catherine. I know you threatened her before her passing. I know about your plans for me and Ethan from the very beginning." For the first time, Vanessa seemed genuinely surprised. "How did you—" She stopped herself, realizing she was incriminating herself. "We found the flash drive you buried on your property," Brandon explained. "The one with Catherine's recording and all the evidence she gathered against you." "That bitch," Vanessa muttered before catching herself in front of the chief. "This is ridiculous. Those documents could be forged. You're just trying to frame me because you're ashamed to admit you were left at the altar." Chief Carter spoke up for the first time. "Mrs. Collins, we have enough evidence to launch a formal investigation. And now, with this new incident involving the unauthorized surveillance of a minor, the situation has escalated." "What incident?" Vanessa asked, seeming genuinely confused. "Don't play dumb," Brandon shot back. "Your photographer was caught following my son in the park less than an hour ago." For a brief moment, something like genuine concern flickered across Vanessa's face. "I didn't send anyone to follow your son today, Brandon. Why would I do something so blatant?" There was something in her reaction that made Brandon hesitate. Could she actually be telling the truth? "If it wasn't you, then who?" he asked. Vanessa seemed to be deep in thought. "My father has his own methods. And then there's also—" She stopped abruptly. "Also who, Vanessa?" She sighed as if weighing her options. "Your cousin, Michael. He approached me a few months ago, right after we started dating. He wanted information about you, about your plans for the company." Brandon felt like he'd been punched in the gut. Michael, his own cousin, betraying him? "Why should I believe you?" "Because I have nothing left to lose now," Vanessa replied with calculated coldness. "You already have evidence against me, and Michael told me things only someone very close. Shiro, you would know. He said he was tired of being the minority partner, that he deserved more." Brandon remembered Michael's suggestion earlier that he step away from the presidency temporarily. Was it part of a bigger plan? "Chief Carter, we need to expand this investigation," Brandon said, his mind racing, "and I need to speak with my sister right away." As Richard accompanied the chief to formalize the charges against Vanessa, Brandon called Hannah again. "Change of plans. Don't come to the office. I'll meet you directly at the Oak Tree restaurant in Beacon Hill. It's more public, safer." "Brandon, you're scaring me even more. What's going on?" "I think we have more than one enemy in this story. Trust me, Hannah. Just go to the restaurant and don't leave until I get there." After hanging up, Brandon turned to Vanessa, who was watching him with an unreadable expression. "What are you going to do with me?" she asked, her earlier arrogance gone. "That's up to the authorities now. But if I find out you lied about Michael to confuse me—" "I didn't," Vanessa interrupted. "Ask him about the Ocean Pathways project. See how he reacts." With those cryptic words, Vanessa allowed herself to be led, away by the security guard Rachel had called. On his way to the restaurant, Brandon couldn't stop thinking. Was it possible that, on top of nearly marrying a woman who saw him only as a means to get rich, he was also being betrayed by his own cousin, someone he considered almost a brother? At the Oak Tree, famous for the massive century-old tree at its center, Hannah waited anxiously, holding Ethan's hand as he tried climbing onto a chair to get a better look at the tree. "Ethan, please sit still, Daddy's on his way," Hannah urged, checking her phone repeatedly. "But Auntie, I want to see if there are birds in the tree," the boy protested. "Later, sweetheart. Right now we need to wait for Daddy." The moment. Brandon walked into the restaurant. Hannah felt immediate relief. Ethan ran to his father, who lifted him tightly, as if afraid of losing him. "Daddy, I saw a man taking pictures of me at the park, Ethan said excitedly. The big guy told him to leave. Brandon's blood ran cold, but he kept his expression calm so as not to scare his son. Good thing the security guard was there, huh? He said, exchanging a meaningful look with Hannah, sitting at the table while Ethan colored a children's booklet provided by the restaurant. Brandon quietly filled his sister in on the latest developments. Michael. It can't be, Hannah said, disbelieving. You grew up together. He's like a brother to you. I don't want to believe it either, but too many things don't add up. His suggestion that I step back as president, the perfect timing of the investor troubles. And why would Vanessa specifically mention the Ocean Pathways project? Hannah frowned, thoughtful. The Ocean Pathways project was the one you took on alone, against Michael's advice, wasn't it? That hotel complex on the north coast of New York City? Exactly. Michael thought it was too risky, but I insisted. It ended up being our most profitable venture last year. Maybe he's resented you since then, Hannah suggested. Or maybe Vanessa is just playing me, trying to drive a wedge between Michael and me. Hannah placed her hand over her brother's. What do we do now? First, get you and Ethan somewhere safe. Then I'll find out the truth about Michael. As they spoke, Brandon noticed suspicious movement near the restaurant entrance. A man in a dark suit seemed to be watching them discreetly. Don't look now, but I think we're being watched, he murmured to Hannah. The same man from the park, she asked, tensing. I can't be sure. But let's not take chances. We'll leave through the kitchen. I know the manager. Brandon gave a discreet signal to one of the waiters, who soon brought the manager to their table. After a brief explanation, they were escorted through the kitchen to a service exit, where Brandon's driver waited with the car. Where are we going, Daddy? Ethan asked, thrilled by what seemed like an adventure. We're taking a surprise trip, champ. How about a few days at the beach? The boy's eyes lit up with excitement as Brandon exchanged worried glances with Hannah. The situation was growing increasingly dangerous, and he needed to protect his family while uncovering the true extent of the conspiracy against him. What he didn't know was that as they headed to Montauk, Michael Mitchell was secretly meeting with Victor Collins at a discreet hotel in Beverly Hills. What the two men were planning would forever alter the course of events and the lives of Brandon and Ethan. As the car traveled along the coastal highway toward the shore, Ethan fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the day's emotions. Hannah stared out the window, lost in thought, while Brandon alternated between calling Richard for updates and checking if they were being followed. Do you really think Michael could be involved in this? Hannah finally asked, breaking the silence. I don't know who to trust anymore, Hannah. If you'd asked me yesterday whether Vanessa was capable of all this, I would have laughed at the idea. It's different. Michael is family. And family never betrays us? Brandon asked bitterly. His father, our Uncle Frank, always resented mine for keeping majority control of the company. Maybe Michael inherited that resentment. Hannah sighed. We need proof before accusing Michael. He's always been good to us, especially to Ethan after Catherine left. The mention of his late wife made Brandon think again of the recording he'd found on the flash drive. Catherine's voice, warning him about Vanessa. How had he not noticed that woman's obsession before? How had he missed the signs? You know what's the scariest part of all this? He said, lowering his voice so as not to wake Ethan. Realizing how long Vanessa has been planning this, she knew Catherine, worked with her. And after Catherine was gone, she waited, plotted, and appeared in my life as if by coincidence. The question now is, what will she do next? And if Michael really is involved, what do they want? The company, obviously, Brandon replied. Mitchell Properties is worth a fortune, and with Ethan being so young, if something were to happen to me. He didn't finish the sentence, but the thought hung there like a dark cloud. Nothing will happen to you, Hannah said firmly. We'll figure this out. They reached the beach house as the sun began to set. It was a modern, yet understated home tucked away in a more secluded part of Montauk. Few knew about this retreat. Brandon had bought the property after Catherine's death, wanting a quiet place to bring Ethan occasionally. Home sweet home, at least for now, Brandon murmured, carrying his sleeping son inside. They settled Ethan into one of the bedrooms and then checked the house's security, locks, alarms, outdoor cameras. Brandon sent their location to Chief Carter and Richard, just as a precaution. "I'll make us something to eat," Hannah offered, heading to the kitchen. Alone on the porch, watching the darkening ocean under the twilight sky, Brandon finally allowed himself a moment of weakness. How had his life turned into this nightmare so quickly? Just 24 hours ago, he'd been preparing to get married, believing he'd found a new chance at happiness. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Richard. "Brandon, we have news. The Federal Bureau of Investigation issued search warrants for Vanessa Collins's home and office. They found more incriminating documents, including detailed information about you and Ethan that she'd been collecting for years." "What about Michael? Is there any evidence of his involvement?" There was a pause on the other end. "Not yet, but there's something odd. When we checked the company's recent bank transfers, we noticed unusual activity in the last few weeks. Large sums, being moved to a consulting firm called Oceanic. I've never heard of that company." "Exactly. And guess who one of the silent partners is? Victor Collins." Brandon felt his stomach drop. "I need to review the documents I signed recently. There might be something I authorized without realizing it. We're already checking. And there's more," Richard continued. "Vanessa was released a few hours ago. Her father's influence worked, at least temporarily. Damn it, does she know where we are? We didn't reveal your location, but it's better to stay alert. Chief Carter is sending a patrol car to discreetly monitor the area, just as a precaution." After hanging up, Brandon went back inside the house and found Hannah in the kitchen. "Vanessa is out," he said bluntly. "How is that possible with all the evidence?" "Powerful connections," Brandon replied bitterly. "And there's more. It seems the company has been making payments to a consulting firm linked to her father." Hannah stopped chopping vegetables, alarmed. "How did this happen without you knowing?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out. I need to review all the documents I've signed over the last few months." As they ate dinner in silence, interrupted only by periodic checks on Ethan, who was still sound asleep, Brandon couldn't stop thinking about the pieces of this puzzle that didn't fit. If Michael was involved, how had he authorized transfers without Brandon's knowledge? And what was Vanessa and Victor's real goal? After dinner, while Hannah washed the dishes, Brandon went to check on Ethan again. The boy was sleeping peacefully, clutching the small stuffed bear Catherine had given him as a baby, and which he never let go of. The sight of his son, so vulnerable and innocent, strengthened his resolve to resolve this situation as quickly as possible. Back in the living room, Brandon opened his laptop and began reviewing the company files he'd brought with him. After nearly 2 hours of meticulous analysis, he found something. "Hannah, come look at this," he called. His sister approached, peering over his shoulder at the computer screen. "What is it?" "A strategic consulting contract with Oceanic, signed 2 months ago." "But I don't remember signing this." Hannah examined the document on the screen. "Is that your signature?" Brandon zoomed in, studying it carefully. "It looks like it, but wait." He opened another document side by side for comparison. "See? The difference here at the end of the M. It's subtle, but it's off." "They forged your signature?" Hannah asked, disbelieving. "Looks like it. And check the date, March 15th. I was in Washington, D.C. that day at a hearing with the Department of Urban Development about the Vertical Gardens project. And who was in charge of the company while you were away?" "Michael," Brandon replied, the confirmation leaving a bitter taste in his mouth. "I need to call Richard again." While Brandon explained the discovery to his lawyer, Hannah went to check on Ethan. When she returned, her expression was tense. "Brandon, did you leave Ethan's bedroom window open?" "No, why?" "It's open now, and I'm sure it was closed when I put him to bed." They exchanged alarmed glances before rushing to the boys' room. Ethan was still asleep, seemingly undisturbed, but as Brandon moved to close the window, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. Footprints in the dirt outside. "Someone was here," he whispered. "Recently." Hannah quickly checked the room, making sure nothing was missing and that Ethan was unharmed. "He's fine. But how did someone find us so fast?" Brandon thought for a moment, and then a terrible possibility struck him. "My phone. If someone has access to my accounts or installed spyware, he grabbed the device and turned it off immediately. We can't stay here, he decided. It's not safe. Where are we going in the middle of the night with a sleeping child? Asked Hannah. Brandon Mitchell thought quickly. I know someone who can help us. Jennifer Brooks, the landscape designer who worked for Vanessa. She mentioned having a small inn in the area. Let's use your phone to find her contact. In less than half an hour, they had packed the essentials, and with Ethan still asleep in his father's arms, they left the house through the back door. Using the car they had parked in the garage, they took back roads to Jennifer's inn, located in a more remote part of Montauk. The small inn, more of a family-run guest house than a commercial establishment, was closed for the season. Jennifer, surprised by the late-night visit, greeted them in her robe, but immediately understood the gravity of the situation when Brandon briefly explained what had happened. You can stay in the back cottage, she offered. It's more isolated and discreet. No one will know you're here. As they settled Ethan into one of the beds in the rustic but cozy cottage, Hannah voiced her concern. Brandon, if they found us once, they can find us again. This time I took precautions, he replied. I left my phone turned off in the glove compartment of the car, which we parked a few miles from here. We're using cash, no cards, and only Richard knows where we are now, no one else. Jennifer brought hot tea and extra blankets. I'll let you rest. In the morning we can talk more. And don't worry, I'm the only staff here off-season. No one will know you're here. When Jennifer left, Brandon sank heavily into a chair, feeling the weight of the last few days. We need a plan, he told Hannah. We can't keep running forever. What do you intend to do? Confront Michael. With the evidence we have now, he won't be able to deny his involvement. And then, Brandon hesitated, looking at his son sleeping peacefully, unaware of the chaos around him. Then, we rebuild our lives far from all this madness. What Brandon didn't know was that while they sheltered in that isolated cottage, even more unsettling events were unfolding in New York City. Events that would test not only his resilience as a businessman, but also his determination as a father. At the headquarters of Mitchell Properties the next day, chaos had taken hold. News of Brandon's cancelled wedding had leaked to the press, along with rumors of financial fraud within the company. Investors withdrew support, partners suspended contracts, and stock prices plummeted. Michael Mitchell, as self-appointed interim president, had called an emergency board meeting to address the crisis. What no one knew, except the lawyer Richard Morrison, was that Michael was about to face an opponent who had spent the entire night preparing his strategy. Hans' opponent, who had nothing left to lose and everything to protect, Brandon and the company his father had built with such effort. This was the kind of confrontation that would change not just the fate of a company, but also that of a family. And at the center of it all was a 5-year-old boy who unknowingly had set everything in motion by whispering in his father's ear. Daddy, I heard Aunt Vanessa talking on the phone. She said she's sending me to Grandma's house after the wedding. The sun rose timidly over Montauk that morning, filtering through the clouds and lighting the small cottage where Brandon, Hannah, and Ethan had spent the night. Brandon had slept little, his mind tirelessly working to piece together all the parts of this disturbing puzzle. Ethan was the first to wake, with the boundless energy of children who seem to recharge after just a few hours of sleep. Daddy, are we at the beach? He asked, jumping on the bed where Brandon was resting. Yes, champ, we are, Brandon replied, forcing a smile and momentarily pushing aside his worries. We're at a friend's house near the beach. Can we go swimming? Please, please. Hannah, who had just woken up in the next bed, intervened. Breakfast first, young man. Then we'll see what we can do. A soft knock at the door announced Jennifer's arrival, carrying a tray with coffee, milk, homemade bread, and fruit. Good morning, she greeted, entering after Hannah's invitation. I hope you managed to get some rest. Thank you for everything, Jennifer, Brandon said, standing up. I don't know how to thank you for your hospitality under such unusual circumstances. Jennifer smiled, placing the tray on a small table. No need to thank me. I consider it a privilege to help, especially after seeing what Vanessa Collins is really like. While Ethan was distracted by some decorative shells on a shelf, Brandon lowered his voice. Jennifer, I need to go back to New York City today. There are matters at the company that can't wait. Do you think—" He hesitated, unsure if he should ask for another favor. "Your sister and son can stay here as long as needed," Jennifer said, seeming to read his thoughts. "My inn is closed for renovations this season, so we won't have guests. It's the perfect place for them to stay safely. Are you sure it won't be a bother?" "Absolutely. In fact, it'll be pleasant company. And there's a private beach just a few minutes away where your son can play safely." Hannah, who had overheard the conversation, stepped closer. "Brandon, I don't think it's safe for you to go back alone." "I have no choice, Hannah. Michael is taking control of the company. If I don't act now, I could lose everything our father built, and more importantly, lose the means to secure Ethan's future." Hannah knew arguing was pointless. Once Brandon made a decision, especially when it involved protecting family, nothing could change his mind. "At least take this," Jennifer said, handing him a simple prepaid phone, the kind sold at any convenience store. "It's new, never been used, and I bought it with cash. No one can trace it." Brandon thanked her, surprised by the woman's insight. "You seem prepared for situations like this." A sad smile crossed Jennifer's face. "Let's just say I've dealt with people like Vanessa before. I've learned some valuable lessons." After breakfast, Brandon took a few moments to play with Ethan in the small outdoor area of the cottage. The boy was fascinated by a kitten that had appeared, and for a moment, watching his son laugh as the kitten chased a leaf, Brandon could forget the storm he'd soon face. "Daddy has to take care of some work things, son," he explained, kneeling to be at the boy's level. "I'll have to travel today, but Aunt Hannah will stay with you, and you can play at the beach. How does that sound?" Ethan made a little disappointed face. "Will you be back soon?" "As fast as I can, I promise." "Pinky promise?" the boy insisted, holding out his pinky. "Pinky promise," Brandon confirmed, linking his finger with his son's in a solemn vow. No business contract could ever surpass in importance. Hannah drove him to the main road in her car, stopping at Joe's Bar, where Brandon had arranged to meet a rideshare driver who'd take him to the bus station. "Be careful," Hannah pleaded, hugging her brother. "And keep in touch using the phone Jennifer gave you. I programmed my number into it." "I'll be fine. Take care of Ethan and don't leave the inn except to go to the private beach Jennifer mentioned, and even then, be cautious." "Don't worry. And Brandon." Hannah hesitated. "Don't confront Michael alone. He might be more dangerous than we think." Brandon nodded, though he knew a confrontation would be inevitable. If Michael's betrayal was confirmed, it was something he'd have to face personally. The trip back to New York City was tense, with Brandon splitting his time between planning his next moves and constantly checking if he was being followed. When he finally arrived in the city, it was already past 3 in the afternoon. His first stop was Richard Morrison's office. "Brandon!" the lawyer exclaimed, genuinely surprised to see him walk into his office. "I didn't expect you back so soon. Is it safe for you to be here?" "Necessary, not safe," Brandon replied, taking a seat. "What did you find out about the payments to Oceanic?" Richard picked up a folder from his desk. "Just as we suspected. The signature on the consulting contract was forged. I compared it to other samples of your signature. There are subtle but undeniable differences. What's more, I traced the source of the payments. They were all authorized by Michael, using a general power of attorney you granted him last year. When I was in London for that real estate expo," Brandon recalled, feeling foolish for having trusted his cousin with so much power. "Exactly. And there's more. Victor Collins isn't just a partner at Oceanic. The company was created specifically for this purpose. It has no other clients, provides no real services. It's just a channel to siphon funds from Mitchell Properties." Brandon let out a heavy sigh, the reality of the betrayal sinking in deeper. "What about the board meeting Michael called?" "It's scheduled for tomorrow at 10 in the morning. The official agenda is crisis management, but I have information that he plans to propose your permanent removal as chairman, citing emotional instability and possible involvement in financial irregularities." "Irregularities he created himself," Brandon remarked bitterly. "Is he planning to pin the Oceanic payments on me?" "Most likely. It's an elaborate plan. First, create evidence of financial misconduct. Then, use the cancelled wedding scandal to suggest emotional instability. Finally, position himself as the company's savior in times of crisis. What about Vanessa? Where does she fit into all this? Richard adjusted his glasses, looking uncomfortable. That's the most disturbing part, based on the documents. We found, it seems, the original plan was for her to marry you, gain your complete trust, and eventually convince you to transfer more power to Michael within the company while gradually distancing you from little Ethan. Distance me from my own son? Brandon's outrage was palpable. For what purpose? The end goal seemed to be isolating you completely. A man without family, without emotional support, becomes more vulnerable, more easily manipulated, and if you eventually lost control of the company, Ethan, as your heir, would be next in line when he came of age. Cutting you off from the boy was a way to ensure that bond weakened. Monstrous, Brandon murmured, a mix of anger and horror washing over him. And to think I almost married her. The cancelled wedding apparently sped up Plan B. Michael is moving faster than we expected, trying to seize control before you can react. Well, he didn't count on me returning so soon, Brandon said, renewed determination in his voice. What are our legal options? Richard opened another folder. We have 3 lines of action. First, the evidence of forgery of your signature, which constitutes fraud. Second, the diversion of funds to Oceanic without any services in return, which amounts to embezzlement. Third, the conspiracy between Michael, Vanessa, and Victor to undermine you and take control of the company. Enough to arrest them. Legally, yes, but we need to proceed carefully. Michael has allies on the board, and Victor Collins has powerful connections. If we act rashly, they could retaliate in ways we can't predict. Brandon reflected for a moment. Then we need to be smarter. Show up at the board meeting tomorrow and confront them with all the evidence at once, without giving them time to react. It's risky, Richard warned, but it could work, especially if we have the support of other board members. I'll discreetly speak to those I trust. Do that. Meanwhile, I'll prepare for the confrontation. I need copies of all the documents implicating Michael and his ties to the Collins family. As he left Richard's office, dusk was settling over New York City. Brandon decided not to return to his apartment, opting instead to stay at a discreet downtown hotel, paying in cash and using a fake name as his lawyer had suggested. In the hotel room, he called Hannah using a prepaid phone. "How are things there?" he asked as soon as his sister answered. "Quiet." Ethan spent the afternoon playing at the beach with Jennifer. He's exhausted, already had dinner, and is now asleep. "And you? Are you really okay?" "Yes, don't worry. This place is truly secluded, and Jennifer has been amazing. You know, she's not just a landscaper. She studied business administration before switching careers. She's an interesting woman." Brandon smiled, recognizing his sister's attempt to distract him from his worries. "I'm glad you're in good hands. Tomorrow's the big day, the board meeting at 10. You'll pull it off, Bran. You've always been sharper than Michael ever since you were kids. I hope so. There's a lot at stake." After hanging up, Brandon opened his laptop and began reviewing all the documents Richard had sent him, meticulously preparing for the next day's confrontation. Sometime in the early morning, exhaustion finally overtook him, and he fell asleep at the makeshift desk, dreaming of simpler days when Catherine was still alive, and Ethan was just a baby. Morning came too quickly. Brandon took a refreshing shower, put on his best suit, the one Catherine always said made him look invincible, and headed to Mitchell Properties headquarters. The receptionist nearly dropped the phone when she saw him walk in. "Mr. Mitchell, we didn't know you were coming today." "Good morning, Patricia. Has the board started meeting yet?" "Not yet, sir. They're all in the coffee lounge waiting for the scheduled time." "Perfect. Please don't announce my arrival." Brandon took the private elevator straight to the executive floor, his heart racing as he neared the confrontation that could determine the future of the company and his family. On the 20th floor, he found Deborah at her desk, who gave him a genuine smile when she saw him. "Mr. Brandon, it's so good to have you back. We were all so worried." "Thank you, Deborah. I know I can count on you. Is Michael around?" "In his office, preparing for the meeting, I imagine. Should I announce you?" "No, I'd rather surprise him. Please, when Richard Morrison arrives, escort him directly to the boardroom." Brandon walked through the familiar halls, noticing the surprised glances from employees. Some looked relieved to see him, while others seemed uneasy, likely already swayed by the rumors Michael had spread. When he reached Michael's office door, he paused for a moment, took a deep breath, and walked in without knocking. Michael was on the phone, his back to the door, gazing out the window that offered a panoramic view of New York City. "Yes, Victor, everything is ready. The board will have no choice but to approve the removal. I already have Marcus and Lauren's support, and Ruth is hesitant, but I think—" He turned and froze when he saw Brandon standing at the door. "I'll call you back." Hanging up abruptly, Michael tried to compose himself, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Brandon, what a surprise. I thought you were resting after recent events." "Clearly not as rested as you'd like, cousin," Brandon replied coldly. "Or should I say, traitorous partner." Michael's smile faltered, but he kept his composure. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just trying to protect the company during this difficult time. You weren't in any condition to handle business, so I stepped in temporarily. Spare me the act, Michael. I know about Oceanic. I know about your deal with Victor Collins. I know about the fraudulent transfers you authorized using my power of attorney." Michael visibly paled, but quickly recovered. "Those are serious accusations, Brandon. Do you have proof?" "All of it, including confirmation that the signature on the consulting contract was forged." A tense silence settled between the two men, cousins who had grown up together, who had once been almost like brothers, now torn apart by betrayal and distrust. "Why, Michael?" Brandon finally asked, the hurt evident in his voice. "Why do this to me, to Ethan?" Michael let out a bitter laugh. "Why, you still have to ask. It was always you, Brandon. Uncle Andrew's favorite, the natural heir, the brilliant president. And what was left for me? Being your assistant, your minority partner, living forever in your shadow? You were always treated as an equal in this company. My father—" "Your father tolerated me because I was his brother's son," Michael interrupted, years of bitterness finally spilling over. "He never trusted me the way he trusted you. And when you took over as president, you carried on the tradition, always consulting me, but never really considering my opinions. The Ocean Pathways project was the last straw. The project you said would fail, which ended up being our biggest success last year." "Exactly." Michael slammed his hand on the desk. "You completely ignored my advice, followed your gut, and as always, you were right. Do you know how that made me feel? Like a worthless fool, an unnecessary appendage in this company." Brandon watched his cousin with a mix of pity and disdain. "So you decided to team up with the Collinses to bring me down? To steal what I built?" "Actually, Victor approached me first. He noticed my discontent. He offered a partnership. He'd use his connections to expand our client base. I'd secure a more prominent position in the company, and together we'd take the business to new heights." "And Vanessa, how does she fit into this plan?" Michael averted his gaze, almost looking ashamed. "She already knew you, knew about your past with Catherine. Victor suggested she could get close to you, earn your trust, eventually marry you." "And get rid of my son," Brandon finished, fury boiling in his veins. "A 5-year-old boy, Michael, my son, your nephew in every way but blood." "That was her idea, not mine," Michael defended quickly. "I never wanted to hurt Ethan. Vanessa well, she has her own reasons for wanting to push you away from the boy. Reasons that include a sick obsession with my late wife, apparently." Michael seemed genuinely surprised. "What do you mean? You didn't know?" "Vanessa and Catherine worked together. Vanessa was fired after trying to sabotage one of Catherine's projects. She had an obsession, a pathological jealousy. After Catherine's death, she saw the opportunity to take everything that was hers, her husband, her son, her life." Michael sank into his chair, visibly shaken by the revelation. "I didn't know that, Brandon. Victor never mentioned it. He only said Vanessa had her own reasons for wanting to get close to you." "And you didn't think it was important to question what those reasons were?" Brandon challenged. "Or were you so obsessed with bringing me down that you didn't care about the methods?" Michael didn't answer, his silence more telling than any words. "The board meeting starts in 30 minutes, Brandon continued. "I'll be there with all the evidence of your actions. You have until then to decide. Either resign voluntarily from your position and give up your shares in the company, or face the legal consequences. And believe me, Michael, I'll take this all the way." "You wouldn't do that," Michael challenged, regaining some composure. "We're family. A scandal like this would hurt the company. The stocks would plummet." "Test me," Brandon replied coldly. "You conspired against me, tried to steal my company, and threatened my son's safety. There are no limits to what I'd do to protect him. Think carefully, cousin." 30 minutes. With those words, Brandon left the room, feeling strangely calm despite the emotional storm he'd just faced. In the hallway, he ran into Richard, who arrived with a folder full of documents. "Did you talk to him?" the lawyer asked, noticing Brandon's determined expression. "Yes, I gave him an ultimatum. Let's see if he has the sense to accept it. And if he doesn't?" Brandon adjusted his tie, the same one he'd nervously straightened on the day he almost married Vanessa, in a past that now seemed so distant. Then let the battle begin. The boardroom gradually filled with the directors and advisors of Mitchell Properties, familiar faces with tense expressions, all aware this wouldn't be an ordinary meeting. Michael was one of the last to enter, avoiding Brandon's gaze. He was already seated at the head of the table, his rightful place as chairman. "Ladies and gentlemen," Brandon began once everyone settled. "Thank you all for being here at this meeting called by Mr. Michael Mitchell. As per the agenda, we'll discuss the alleged crisis the company is facing. But first, I'd like to clarify a few key points." He signaled to Richard, who handed out folders to each board member. "Inside these folders, you'll find evidence of a conspiracy to defraud Mitchell Properties, embezzle funds, and ultimately remove me unlawfully as chairman." A murmur spread through the room. Ruth Vanderbilt, one of the most senior and respected advisors, was the first to speak. "These are very serious accusations, Brandon. Could you elaborate?" "Gladly, Ruth. As you'll see in the documentation, substantial transfers were made over the past months to a shell company called Oceanic Consulting. These transfers were authorized by Mr. Michael Mitchell, using a temporary power of attorney I granted him during my trip to London last year." "That proves nothing," interrupted Marcus Goldberg, a board member known for his loyalty to Michael. "Michael had authorization to act on your behalf. The power of attorney was for regular company operations, not to establish new consulting contracts," Richard clarified. "Moreover, as you can see in the forensic report on page 3, Brandon's signature on the Oceanic contract was forged. And the most interesting part," Brandon continued, "is who's behind Oceanic. Victor Collins, father of Vanessa Collins, the woman I nearly married recently." Lauren Palmer, another advisor, looked confused. "I don't see the connection. Just because you called off your engagement to his daughter—" "The connection runs deeper, Lauren," explained Brandon. "As the recovered emails and messages on page 7 show, there was a deliberate conspiracy between Michael, Victor, and Vanessa to push me out of the company. The marriage to Vanessa was part of that plan." Michael, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke. "This is absurd. Brandon is clearly distraught over the cancelled wedding. He's seeing conspiracies where none exist." "Is that so?" Brandon challenged, his voice growing sharper. "Then how do you explain the transfers to Oceanic, a company with no employees, no real physical address, no other clients besides Mitchell Properties? How do you explain your phone call with Victor Collins this morning discussing how to secure votes to remove me as chairman?" Michael paled again, clearly not expecting Brandon to have overheard that conversation. "I was just betraying," Brandon finished. "Betraying the company, betraying the trust I placed in you, betraying our family." Ruth flipped through the documents with a grave expression. "There appears to be substantial evidence here, Michael. If all this is true, we're looking at serious corporate fraud, not to mention potential criminal liability," added Richard. "Forgery, embezzlement, conspiracy." Michael looked around the table, realizing he was losing the support of even the board members he thought he had convinced. Finally, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "I never meant for it to go this far," he murmured. "I just wanted more recognition, more say in the company. And then Victor Collins came with his proposals, and it all seemed to make sense. "Gentlemen of the board," Brandon interjected, "in light of these revelations, I propose two motions. First, the immediate removal of Michael Mitchell from all executive positions at Mitchell Properties. Second, the hiring of an independent auditor to assess the full extent of the financial damage caused by his actions." "And what about his shares in the company?" asked Marcus. "I've offered Michael the chance to resign voluntarily and sell his shares back to the company at a fair price," Brandon explained. "The alternative would be facing criminal charges. The choice is his." All eyes turned to Michael, who seemed to have aged 10 years in the last few minutes. "I accept your offer, Brandon," he said finally. "I'll resign and sell my shares, but I want to make it clear. I never meant to harm Ethan. That was Vanessa's idea, not mine." "That doesn't lessen your guilt," Brandon replied coldly. "Richard will prepare the necessary documents. I expect them signed by the end of the day." The two motions were unanimously approved by the board, and the meeting adjourned in less than an hour, far quicker than anyone had expected when they arrived. As the board members filed out, many stopping to express their support for Brandon, Ruth Vanderbilt stayed behind for a private word. "You acted with firmness, but also wisdom, Brandon," she said, "offering Michael an exit that preserves the company's reputation. I didn't do it for him, Ruth. I did it for my father's memory, who built this company from the ground up, and for my son's future, who may one day take this seat." "I understand. And what about the Collinses? Victor has powerful connections, and from what I gather, his daughter seems to have an unsettling fixation on your family." "We're handling it," Brandon assured her. "Chief Carter from the Federal Bureau of Investigation is already investigating their activities, and I have enough evidence to keep them at bay." Ruth nodded, satisfied. "Well, you've proven today why your father always trusted you so much. Mitchell Properties is in good hands." After Ruth left, Brandon finally allowed himself to relax, slightly loosening his tie. Richard approached, placing documents into his briefcase. "It was easier than we expected," commented the lawyer. "Michael completely broke down when he saw the evidence." "He was always better at conspiracies than direct confrontations," observed Brandon. "Deep down, I think he knew he couldn't keep up this charade much longer." "What will you do now?" "First, make sure Michael's resignation documents and the sale of his shares are in order. Then take steps to protect the company from any retaliation by the Collins family. And then—" Brandon smiled for the first time that day. "Return to Montauk, to my son." "A wise decision," Richard approved. "But before you leave, there's someone who wants to speak with you." "She's waiting in your office." "Who?" "Melanie Owen, Catherine's former secretary, remember? She has more information about Vanessa that she thinks you should know." Intrigued, Brandon headed to his office, where he found Melanie waiting, nervously a yellow folder in her hands. "Mr. Mitchell, thank you for seeing me," she said, standing as he entered. "You've already helped me a great deal, Melanie. What else have you found?" "After our last meeting, I kept investigating on my own. Vanessa Collins wasn't just a jealous co-worker of Catherine's. Her interest in Catherine's life, in you and your family, goes much further back and is far more disturbing." She opened the folder, revealing photographs, newspaper clippings, and documents. Vanessa practically studied Catherine's life for years. She copied her mannerisms, her style of dressing. She even took the same university courses and internships. When she couldn't surpass Catherine professionally, her obsession turned into resentment. "My God," Brandon murmured, flipping through the material. "This is sick." "There's more. I found this hidden among Catherine's belongings that I still had with me. She asked me to keep a box of documents before she passed, but I never had the courage to open it until recently. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out." Now, continuing. Melanie handed Brandon a sealed envelope with his name written in Catherine's unmistakable handwriting. With trembling hands, he opened it, finding a letter dated just days before his wife's passing. "Dear Brandon, if you're reading this, it means my suspicions were correct and I couldn't warn you in person. In the last months of my illness, I've received strange messages from someone I knew from the past. Vanessa Collins worked with me for 3 years and always displayed obsessive behavior, copying my style, my ideas, trying to insert herself into my professional and personal life. After she was fired for attempted sabotage, I thought I was free of her. But recently she started contacting me again, with increasingly disturbing messages, claiming she would take care of you and Ethan when I was gone, as if she already knew my time was limited. I fear she'll try to get close to you both after I'm gone. Brandon, I know you'll be vulnerable. I know Ethan will need a mother figure, but please be careful. This woman isn't what she seems. I've attached proof of the messages and a report I privately commissioned to investigate her activities. I hope I'm wrong. I hope this is just the paranoia of a sick woman. But if it's not, protect our son. Protect yourself. With all my love forever, Catherine. Brandon felt the air leave his lungs. Catherine had known. She had tried to protect them even when she knew she wouldn't be here. The pain of loss, always present but usually controlled, surged back in full force. She tried to warn me, he murmured, more to himself than to Melanie. Even in her final days, she was thinking about protecting us. That was just like Miss Catherine, agreed Melanie, tears in her eyes. Always putting others first, especially you and little Ethan. Brandon carefully tucked away the letter and attached documents. This will be useful for the case against Vanessa. Thank you, Melanie, truly thank you. What will happen to her now? Asked Melanie. She'll face the consequences of her actions, Brandon replied firmly, both legally and personally. I won't let her keep threatening my family. After Melanie left, Brandon called Chief Carter to inform him about the new evidence. Then he called Hannah. We did it, Hannah, we did it. Michael stepped down. The board is on our side and we have more evidence against Vanessa. You're safe now. Thank God. Ethan keeps asking about you non-stop. When are you coming back? I'm wrapping up the last details here and hitting the road later today. I should be there by evening. I'll tell him, he'll be so happy. After hanging up, Brandon spent the next few hours reorganizing the company. He called a meeting with the top executives, reassured them about Mitchell Properties' stability, and implemented measures to undo the damage caused by Michael. He also made sure the resignation papers were properly signed and filed. When he finally left the office in the late afternoon, he felt exhausted but relieved. The main battle was won. The company was secure. Now all he wanted was to get back to his son and start rebuilding their lives far from that sordid scheme. On the drive to Montauk, behind the wheel this time, Brandon couldn't help reflecting on how drastically his life had changed in just a few days. From a fiancé about to marry a woman he believed he loved, to a man fighting to protect everything precious to him from an elaborate conspiracy. And at the center of it all was his little Ethan, with his sharp instincts and innocent courage warning him about Vanessa at the crucial moment. The sun was beginning to set when Brandon finally pulled up to Jennifer's inn. He'd barely parked when Ethan came running out the front door, with Hannah and Jennifer close behind. "Daddy! Daddy!" the boy shouted, throwing himself into his father's arms. "You're back." Brandon lifted his son into the air, spinning him once before hugging him tight. "Course I'm back, champ. Pinky promise, remember?" "We've been waiting for you for dinner," said Hannah, hugging her brother. "Jennifer made shrimp stew, and it smells amazing." Brandon looked at Jennifer, who watched the scene with a warm smile. "You've done so much for us, Jennifer. I don't know how to thank you." "Seeing you all together and safe is thanks enough," she replied simply. "Come on, dinner's getting cold." Over the meal, served on the inn's porch with a view of the ocean, Brandon recounted the day's events, leaving out the more disturbing details for Ethan's sake. "So Uncle Michael won't be working with you anymore?" the boy asked, picking up on part of the conversation. "No, son. Uncle Michael chose a different path." "And Aunt Vanessa? Does she still want to send me away?" Brandon exchanged a glance with Hannah before answering carefully, "No, Ethan. Aunt Vanessa won't be part of our lives anymore. No one's sending you away, ever. You'll always stay with me." The boy seemed satisfied with the answer and soon turned his attention to the cat he'd adopted as a friend. He named the kitten, Jennifer remarked, watching Ethan play. Called him Brave. A fitting name. Brandon smiled. considering everything we've been through. After dinner, once Ethan was tucked in, Brandon, Hannah, and Jennifer sat on the porch with glasses of wine talking under the stars. What do you plan to do now?" asked Hannah. "Go back to New York City right away?" "No," replied Brandon, surprising his sister. "I think we'll stay here a few more days. Ethan is loving it, and honestly, I need this time to process everything and think about the future." "You're more than welcome to stay as long as you'd like," assured Jennifer. "As I said, the inn is closed to regular guests this season. I have all the time in the world to finish the planned renovations." "Actually," Brandon said hesitantly, "I was wondering if you'd take on a job. The beach house we were at before needs a complete garden redesign. After everything that happened, I want to turn it into a fresh start for me and Ethan, a place with no bad memories." Jennifer looked surprised, but her eyes sparkled with professional interest. "I'd love to help. I have some ideas for coastal gardens that would be perfect for the area." "Excellent. Once things settle down, we can discuss the details." Hannah watched the exchange with a small smile. "Well, I think I'll turn in. I'm exhausted after trying to keep up with Ethan's energy all day. Good night, you two." After Hannah left, Brandon and Jennifer remained on the porch, the silence between them comfortable, almost familiar. "You've handled all this with such bravery," Jennifer finally remarked. "Many would have crumbled under so much pressure." "I had good reasons to stay strong," Brandon replied. "My son, my father's company, and good people who helped me along the way, like you." Jennifer smiled, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "I just did what any decent person would do. Not everyone would have risked standing up to someone like Vanessa Collins. You knew her, knew what she was capable of, and still chose to help me. That takes courage." "Maybe I just don't like seeing good people being manipulated," she answered, gazing at the dark sea beyond the porch. "I went through something similar in the past. Not as dramatic, but I know what it's like to trust someone who doesn't deserve it. Would you tell me about it someday?" She turned to him, a small smile on her lips. "Someday maybe, but not tonight. I think we've had enough excitement for now, don't you?" Brandon agreed, feeling strangely at ease with this woman he'd known for such a short time, but who had already proven to be a valuable ally and a true friend. "Thank you again, Jennifer, for everything." "You're welcome, Brandon. Now get some rest. You've earned it." In the days that followed, Brandon, Ethan, and Hannah stayed at Jennifer's inn, gradually regaining a sense of normalcy. Ethan spent his days exploring the beach, building sandcastles and playing with Brave, the kitten Jennifer had let them adopt. Hannah used the time to relax, reading books she'd promised herself she'd get to when she had time, and occasionally helping Jennifer with small tasks around the inn. Brandon divided his time between remotely keeping up with developments at the company and simply enjoying this period with his son. It was during these days that he realized how much he'd neglected his relationship with Ethan over the past year. Always busy with work, always chasing deadlines and contracts. One particular afternoon, as he and Ethan built an elaborate sandcastle together, the boy made an observation that deeply moved Brandon. "Daddy, you're different." "Different how, son?" asked Brandon, curious. "You laugh more. And your eyes aren't sad like before." Brandon stopped what he was doing, surprised by his son's perception. "My eyes were sad?" "Yes," Ethan answered, with the straightforward honesty of children. "Ever since Mommy went to heaven. But now they're happy again. Is it because of Jen?" "Jen?" repeated Brandon, genuinely surprised. "Jen. Aunt Jennifer," clarified Ethan, as if it were obvious. "You smile differently when you're with her, like you used to smile for Mom." Brandon didn't know how to respond. He hadn't consciously considered his feelings for Jennifer in that way. Certainly he enjoyed her company, admired her strength and kindness, but to think of it as something more. "I think Jen is a very special person who helped us when we needed it," he finally replied. "That does make me happy, yes." Ethan seemed satisfied with the answer and turned his attention back to the moat he was digging around the castle. Brandon, however, couldn't stop thinking about his son's observation for the rest of the day. That night, after Ethan fell asleep, Brandon found Jennifer sitting alone in the inn's small library, reviewing landscape designs under the glow of a lamp. "Working late?" he asked, stepping in quietly. She smiled, pushing the papers aside. Just some ideas for your beach house gardens. I wanted to show you a few concepts before we finalize the project. Brandon sat in the chair across from her, studying the sketches spread across the table. They were beautiful, showing gardens that blended perfectly with the coastal environment, using native and sustainable plants. These are wonderful, Jennifer. You really have a gift. Thank you. It's a passion I discovered almost by accident. I've always loved plants, but it wasn't until I left the corporate world that I realized I could turn it into a career. Why did you leave? The corporate world, I mean. Jennifer hesitated, weighing her words. Let's just say I learned the hard way that not everyone plays fair. I worked for 5 years at a major construction company in New York City, climbing the ranks quickly, until I found out my boss and mentor was involved in bribery schemes. When I refused to participate and threatened to report him, he framed me for financial misconduct. That's terrible, Brandon exclaimed, outraged. It was a difficult time. I lost my job. My reputation in the industry was tarnished. But looking back, it was the best thing that could have happened to me. It forced me to reevaluate what truly mattered in life, what made me genuinely happy. And you found that in landscaping? Yes. I started with a small garden at my mother's house. The neighbors liked it, asked for help with theirs, and that's how it began. A few years later, I saved enough to buy this inn. It's small, but it's mine, and it lets me combine my two passions, plants and hospitality. Brandon smiled, admiring this woman even more for turning adversity into opportunity. Did you know Ethan asked me today if you were the reason my eyes aren't sad anymore? Jennifer visibly blushed. Kids say the darndest things. They're observant and honest, Brandon replied softly. And maybe he's right. You've brought something back into my life, Jennifer, a peace I haven't felt in a long time. She met his eyes, vulnerability and hope clear on her face. Brandon, The moment was interrupted by the ringing of Brandon's phone. He checked the number. It was Richard. I have to take this. I'm sorry, he said, standing up. It's my lawyer. Stepping into the hallway, Brandon answered the call. Richard, is something wrong? Not exactly wrong, but I thought you should know. Vanessa Collins and Victor were arrested this afternoon. Arrested? Why? On top of the fraud charges related to your company, the Federal Bureau of Investigation found evidence of other similar schemes. It seems you weren't their only victims. And there's more. During the search of Vanessa's home, they found an entire file on you and your family. Photographs, clippings, even a diary where she documented her obsession for years. It's disturbing, Brandon. My God, murmured Brandon, the implications hitting him like a ton of bricks. Will they get a conviction? The evidence is overwhelming. Unless they pull off some legal miracle, they're facing serious time. Victor will probably try to use his connections to reduce the sentence, but even so, what about Michael? He's cooperating fully, which will likely mean a lighter sentence. He seems genuinely remorseful, especially after learning the extent of Vanessa's obsession. After hanging up, Brandon returned to the library, where Jennifer was waiting, clearly concerned by his expression. Did something happen? Vanessa and Victor have been arrested, he informed her, still processing the news. It looks like it's finally over. Jennifer let out a relieved sigh. That's good. You and Ethan are truly safe now. Yes, we are, Brandon agreed, glancing at the garden plans on the table. A fresh start, quite literally blooming before his eyes. You know, I think it's time we really look to the future. What do you have in mind? I've been thinking about cutting back on my workload at the company, delegating more, spending more time with Ethan, maybe even considering a more permanent move to the coast. That'd be a big change for someone as dedicated to business as you, Jennifer observed. All this has made me rethink my priorities. Ethan's growing up so fast, and I've already missed too much by focusing only on the company. Besides, he hesitated. There are other possibilities I'd like to explore. Their eyes met, and in that moment, something quiet but profound passed between them. A mutual understanding that despite all the recent trauma, there was also an opportunity for something new, something good, to grow from the chaos. I think I understand, Jennifer replied softly. The silence that followed was comfortable, full of unspoken but deeply felt promises. It was too soon, they both knew, to name what was beginning to blossom. Brandon still needed to heal from the wounds of betrayal, and there was Ethan to consider. But for the first time since losing Catherine, Brandon allowed himself to glimpse a future where happiness wasn't just a distant memory, but a tangible possibility. "I think I should show these plans to Ethan tomorrow," Brandon suggested, pointing to the garden sketches. "He has some very specific ideas about where to put a swing and a treehouse." Jennifer laughed, the sound warm and genuine filling the small library. "It'll be a pleasure to incorporate your assistant architect's ideas." The next morning, as he watched Ethan and Jennifer seriously debating the ideal placement of a treehouse over the breakfast table, Brandon felt a peace he hadn't known in years. Hannah, beside him, observed the scene with a knowing smile. "She's special, isn't she?" Hannah remarked quietly. "Very," Brandon agreed, "but it's too soon to name it, perhaps," Hannah gently interrupted. "But not to recognize it. Just know that when you're ready, you have my full blessing. And I think you'd have Catherine's too." Hannah's words touched Brandon deeply. Catherine always said love was never too much, never ran out. It simply transformed and found new paths. Maybe that was what was happening now, not a replacement for what he'd had with Catherine, but a new way for love to find expression in his life. Meanwhile, in New York City, the press reported the arrests of Vanessa and Victor Collins, and Mitchell Properties issued reassuring statements to investors and partners. The storm was beginning to pass, and though the damage was significant, it was reparable. Michael, in his apartment now emptied of valuable belongings he had begun selling to pay off his debts, read the news with a mix of remorse and relief. He had lost much, his position, his reputation, part of his fortune, but at least he had escaped a harsher sentence thanks to his cooperation. And more importantly, he had shed the corrosive weight of resentment he had carried for so many years. Perhaps eventually he could rebuild something of his life, far from the shadow of Mitchell Properties and the memories of his betrayal. Week after the Collins arrest, Brandon finally decided it was time to return to New York City. The company needed him, and there were many details to resolve, but he wouldn't return the same way he had left. "Jennifer," he said the evening, before his departure, as they walked along the beach at sunset, "I'd like to make you an offer." "What kind of offer?" she asked, curious. "Besides the landscaping project for the beach house, I'd like to hire you to redesign the gardens at Mitchell Properties headquarters in New York. It's a big, prestigious project that could really boost your name in the market." Jennifer stopped walking, surprised. "Brandon, that's incredibly generous, but you don't have to do this out of gratitude." "It's not out of gratitude," he assured her, gently taking her hands. "It's because I believe in your talent, and because I'd like an excuse to see you often while I figure out what's happening between us." Jennifer's smile brightened gradually, like the sunrise. "In that case, I accept both offers, the professional project and the personal exploration." That night, as he tucked Ethan into bed in the chalet that had been their refuge for nearly 2 weeks, Brandon realized how peaceful his son looked. "We're going home tomorrow, champ. Are you excited?" "Yes," Ethan replied, hugging Brave, who had earned a permanent place in his life. "But I liked it here too. Can we come back?" "Of course. In fact, I was thinking we could renovate our beach house nearby. Jennifer's going to help us make a beautiful garden with a special treehouse just for you." "And will Jen visit us there?" the boy asked hopefully. "Yes, she will, and she'll also come to New York sometimes for a project at Daddy's company." Ethan seemed to consider something deeply, with that seriousness that sometimes caught Brandon off guard. "Daddy, Mommy's in heaven, right?" "Yes, son, she is. And she can see us from there, can't she?" "I believe so," Brandon replied, moved. "Then she can see that your eyes aren't sad anymore. I think that would make her happy." The boy's simple words struck Brandon like a revelation. Ethan was giving his own blessing in his innocent way. "I think you're right, son. I think Mommy would be very happy to see us finding joy again." The next morning, as they said goodbye to the inn, it was with the certainty that it wasn't a farewell but a "see you soon." Jennifer would stay a few more days to finalize her projects before traveling to New York, where she would formally present her proposals to Mitchell Properties. As he drove back to New York, With Ethan and Hannah cheerfully singing a children's song in the back seat, Brandon reflected on the incredible journey they had taken. From a near marriage that would have been his ruin, to an uncovered conspiracy, to a new beginning full of possibilities. It had all started with the whispered words of a 5-year-old boy. "Daddy," I heard her talking on the phone. She said she'd send me to Grandma's house after the wedding. Those simple words had set off a chain of events that changed the course of their lives. Looking in the rearview mirror, Brandon saw Ethan smiling as he played with a small wooden boat Jennifer had given him as a gift. His son was safe, his company was safe, and his heart, so guarded for so long, was beginning to open again to possibilities he hadn't dared consider. It was too soon to know where this new journey would take them, but for the first time in a long while, Brandon felt genuinely hopeful about the future. And that, he knew, was the greatest gift he could have received. A gift sparked by a brave whisper in his ear, a warning that changed everything. The road ahead was long, but for the first time in years, Brandon Mitchell was eager to discover where it would lead. In the weeks following their return to New York City, life gradually settled into a new rhythm. Mitchell Properties began recovering from the shock, with investors returning and projects resuming. True to his promise to reassess his priorities, Brandon made significant changes to his routine. He came home earlier, took an active role in Ethan's school life, and left the office by noon on Fridays to spend special afternoons with his son. The press followed the unfolding Collins case with keen interest, as it grew increasingly sordid with new victims of Victor's schemes coming forward. Vanessa, in particular, became a psychological case study, with experts analyzing her obsession and predatory behavior. Brandon avoided those headlines. He had decided to look forward, not back. His focus now was on rebuilding his company, his relationship with Ethan, and perhaps even his own ability to trust and love again. Jennifer arrived in New York City 2 weeks after their return, staying at a downtown hotel at first. Her presentation to the board of directors at Mitchell Properties was a resounding success. Her proposal to transform the corporate headquarters, green spaces combined sustainability, modern aesthetics and functionality in a way that impressed even the most skeptical executives. "You even won over old Morrison," Brandon remarked after the meeting, referring to the CFO known for resisting any expense he deemed frivolous. "He never approves anything on the first presentation." The trick was showing how the gardens could reduce energy costs in the long run, Jennifer explained proudly. Sustainability isn't just about doing good for the planet, it makes financial sense too. In the months that followed, Jennifer split her time between New York City and Montauk, overseeing both projects personally. The beach house renovation progressed quickly, set to be finished by the end of summer. The headquarters project, more complex, moved forward in carefully planned phases. Brandon and Jennifer's relationship evolved at its own pace, respectful, unhurried. Occasional dinners, weekend outings with Ethan, long conversations about everything and nothing. There was an unspoken understanding between them that time was an ally, not an enemy. One particular Sunday afternoon, as they visited the beach house construction site with Ethan running excitedly around the property, inspecting the nearly finished structure of his long-dreamed-of treehouse, Brandon finally found the courage to take an important step. "Jennifer," he said as they watched Ethan from a distance, "there's something I'd like to ask you." She turned to him, the gentle sea breeze playing with her hair. "Yes? Would you have dinner with me tomorrow night? Just the two of us. An official date, so to speak." Jennifer felt her cheeks warm as Brandon's smile waited for her answer. An official date. A meaningful step for them both. "I'd love to," she finally replied, with a sincerity that went beyond mere words. "Great, I know the perfect place," said Brandon, visibly relieved and happy with her answer. "I'll pick you up at 8. Ethan came running back to them, interrupting the moment with his childlike enthusiasm. "Daddy, Jen, you have to see this. The treehouse has a window where you can see the whole ocean." "Really?" asked Jennifer, kneeling to meet his height. "How amazing. You'll be able to watch ships passing by from up there." "And whales? Can we see whales too?" the boy asked, his eyes wide with excitement. "If we're very lucky, maybe in the right season," she replied, smiling at his eagerness. Watching them, Brandon felt a wave of gratitude for how life had changed. In just a few months, from the brink of disaster with his marriage to Vanessa, to discovering a genuine and pure connection with Jennifer, a woman who had already earned not only his respect, but also his son's heart. On the drive back to New York City that afternoon, Ethan fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted after exploring every inch of the property under renovation. "I'm so excited about the treehouse," Brandon remarked, adjusting the rearview mirror to glance at his sleeping son. "It's a special project for me too," Jennifer admitted. "Maybe the most meaningful of my career so far, even if it's not the biggest." "Why?" "Because it's not just a garden or a structure. It's a fresh start for both of you, a space where new memories will be made." She paused, carefully choosing her words. "I want it to be perfect." The look they exchanged held silent promises, expectations, and possibilities they were just beginning to envision together. The rest of the ride passed in comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between people who don't need to fill every moment with words. The following evening, at exactly 8 o'clock, Brandon parked in front of the small apartment Jennifer had rented in New York City for the month she'd be working on the Mitchell Properties project. He was nervous in a way he hadn't felt in years, that giddy, almost teenage anticipation before a first date. Hannah, who was watching Ethan, had helped her brother get ready, picking out a tie that perfectly complemented his navy blue suit and, more importantly, calming his nerves. "You deserve this, Bran," she'd said while adjusting his tie. "You deserve to find someone who truly values you, someone good." When Jennifer opened the apartment door, Brandon felt his breath catch for a moment. She wore a simple yet elegant emerald green dress that brought out her eyes and beautifully contrasted with her chestnut hair, now loose in natural waves. "You look stunning," he said, handing her a small bouquet of wildflowers. "Thank you," she replied, accepting the flowers with a smile. "They're beautiful, and different from the obvious choice of roses. I thought they suited you better. Natural, authentic, understated." The restaurant Brandon had chosen was in Chelsea, a cozy spot specializing in contemporary American cuisine with organic, locally sourced ingredients, a choice Jennifer deeply appreciated. "How did you know I'd prefer a place like this over a more traditional, formal restaurant?" she asked, admiring the intimate space decorated with reclaimed wood and hanging plants. "Intuition," Brandon ventured. "Or maybe I paid attention when you mentioned your preference for places with character during that talk on the inn's porch." "You pay attention," she observed, impressed. "That's a rare quality." The evening flowed naturally, the conversation shifting between light-hearted moments and deeper reflections. They spoke about their childhoods, past dreams, and hopes for the future. Jennifer shared about her youth in Vermont as the daughter of teachers who valued books more than money. Brandon recounted memories of his father, the founder of Mitchell Properties, and how he insisted that buildings weren't just structures but part of people's lives. "That's why I was so impressed with your approach to landscaping," Brandon admitted. "You don't just see plants and spaces, you see how they affect people, how they can transform experiences." "That's exactly how I feel," Jennifer agreed, her eyes shining. "Gardens aren't just decoration, they're living spaces that can heal, soothe, and inspire." When dessert arrived, a coconut pudding with passion fruit sauce, Jennifer hesitated. Before asking a more personal question, "Brandon, may I ask you something about Catherine?" He nodded, without the usual tension that accompanied mentions of his late wife. What was it like moving forward, after her? Brandon considered the question carefully. "It was the hardest challenge of my life. At first, it seemed impossible. There were days I could barely get out of bed. Ethan was the only reason I kept going. And then gradually, I don't know how to explain it. The pain didn't disappear, but it changed. It became something I could carry without falling apart." "And now?" she asked softly. "Now I understand that honoring Catherine's memory doesn't mean staying stuck in the past. It means living fully, being the best father I can be to Ethan, and—" He paused, looking directly into her eyes. "Being open to happiness when it comes, even in unexpected ways." Jennifer's hand found his on the table, a simple but deeply meaningful gesture. Thank you for sharing that with me, she said. I know it can't be easy. Actually, it's easier with you than it would be with anyone else, Brandon admitted. You never try to compete with her memory, never show insecurity or jealousy about the past. It's like you understand that the heart can expand, not replace. Because it's true, Jennifer replied simply. Love isn't a finite resource. It's like a garden. The more you nurture it, the more it grows. By the end of the night, as Brandon walked her to her apartment door, there was a sweet tension in the air, that quiet anticipation of a first kiss. Thank you for a wonderful evening, Jennifer said, turning to him in the hallway. Thank you for accepting my invitation, Brandon replied, admiring how the soft hallway light reflected in her eyes. Can we do this again? Definitely, she smiled. There was a moment of hesitation, both aware of the meaningful step they were about to take. Then, with the naturalness of something that simply should happen, Brandon leaned in and his lips met hers in a gentle kiss, full of promise. When they parted, no words were needed. The smile they shared said everything. Good night, Jennifer, he murmured finally. Good night, Brandon, she replied, with a sparkle in her eyes that he would carry with him for the rest of the night. In the weeks that followed, their relationship blossomed naturally, like a healthy plant finally finding the right soil. Regular meetups turned into a comfortable routine, with Jennifer often joining Brandon for dinner at his home, taking part in family outings with Ethan and gradually becoming part of their lives. The boy, in turn, seemed to thrive with Jennifer's steady presence. His affection for her was evident in how he would rush to greet her whenever she arrived, how he saved little treasures, shells, colored stones, drawings, to show her, and how he would peacefully fall asleep when she occasionally read him bedtime stories. One such evening, after putting Ethan to bed, Jennifer found Brandon on the apartment balcony, gazing at the city lights with a thoughtful expression. Penny for your thoughts, she said, joining him. I was thinking about how life can change completely in such a short time, he replied, wrapping an arm around her waist. 6 months ago, I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life by marrying Vanessa. And now I feel like I'm finally on the right path. The company is recovering well, Ethan is happier than ever, and he looked at her tenderly. I'm in love with an amazing woman who came into our lives in the most unexpected way. It was the first time he had put his feelings into words, so directly, and Jennifer's face lit up with emotion. I'm in love with you too, Brandon, she replied, her voice slightly trembling, and with that extraordinary little human sleeping inside. They kissed under the starry New York City sky, sealing a feeling that had grown slowly but firmly, like the roots of a deep tree. The next morning, as they had coffee before Ethan woke up, Brandon mentioned something he'd been considering. For days, I was thinking of visiting Catherine's grave this weekend. I usually go on her birthday, which is this Saturday. Jennifer nodded understandingly. It's important to keep those connections, those rituals. Yes, especially for Ethan, Brandon agreed. But this time, I was wondering if you'd like to come with us. I'd completely understand if you'd rather not. It's an unusual situation. I'd love to go, Jennifer replied without hesitation. If you think it's appropriate, of course. Are you sure? A lot of people would find it strange. I don't care what a lot of people think. I care about what it means to you and Ethan, and I think it's a beautiful way to honor the past while building the future. Brandon felt a wave of gratitude for her understanding. Thank you. It means a lot to me. On Saturday, under a clear autumn sky, Brandon, Ethan, and Jennifer visited the cemetery where Catherine was buried. They brought flowers, white lilies, her favorite, and Ethan carried a drawing he'd made especially for the occasion, showing him, his father, and a feminine figure hovering above them like an angel. Mommy, I brought a new drawing, the boy said, carefully placing the paper under a stone so it wouldn't blow away. And I brought Jen too. She takes care of the garden at the beach house and sometimes takes care of me and Daddy too. Jennifer stayed a little back, giving them space for their private moment, until Ethan called her, Jen, come say hi to Mommy. With a glance at Brandon, who nodded tearfully, she stepped forward and knelt beside the boy. Hello, Catherine, she said softly. You have a wonderful son and husband. Thank you for sharing them with me. The moment, far from being strange or uncomfortable, carried a sense of peace, of circles completing. On the way back, Ethan held both adults' hands, skipping between them, his childlike resilience allowing him to move between memory and present with a naturalness adults often lost. "I think Mommy liked you, Jen," he declared confidently. "She must have whispered in your ear when you weren't looking." "Really?" Jennifer asked, surprised by his observation. "What do you think?" she said. "That you make Daddy smile again and that it's okay." Brandon exchanged an emotional glance with Jennifer over their son's head. The wisdom of children could sometimes be disconcerting. With summer approaching, the beach house in Montauk was finally complete, including the meticulously planned gardens by Jennifer and Ethan's long-awaited treehouse. The official unveiling was scheduled for a long holiday weekend with Hannah, a few close friends, and even Ms. Josephine, the family's former housekeeper who had helped raise Brandon and now adored spoiling Ethan. The house, originally a quiet retreat Brandon rarely visited after Catherine's passing, had been completely transformed. The once shadowy spaces were now bright and welcoming. The garden, Jennifer's masterpiece, created distinct areas that invited contemplation, play, or social gatherings, depending on which corner one chose to explore. On the eve of the unveiling, as the final touches were being put in place, Brandon found Jennifer sitting alone on the deck overlooking the ocean, admiring the sunset. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, using the same phrase she often did. Jennifer smiled, making room for him to sit beside her. "I was just thinking about how life takes unexpected turns. A year ago, I was just a landscaper working for Vanessa Collins, unhappy with the toxic environment but needing the job. I never could have imagined where I'd be today." "Regrets?" he asked, though her smile already answered the question. "Not for a second," Jennifer assured him, leaning into him. "Even with all the drama and complications, I wouldn't change a thing because it all led us here." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the sun slowly dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Jennifer," Brandon began, his voice more serious, "I've been thinking a lot these past few months about us, about the future." She turned to face him, sensing the shift in his tone. "Me too," she admitted. "I know it might seem fast to some people, but for me, it's never been clearer. You brought back something I thought I'd lost forever, the ability to look at the future with hope, with joy." Jennifer watched him intently, her eyes shining with restrained emotion. "The house is ready," he continued. "The garden. Here's more beautiful than I ever imagined, but it still feels like something's missing to truly make it a home." "What?" she asked softly. "You," Brandon said simply. "You living here with us, not just visiting. You being part of our family, officially." Jennifer's heart raced. "Brandon, are you—" "Not exactly a marriage proposal," he clarified quickly. "Not yet. I know it's early for that, and I want to respect your time, your space. It's more an invitation to take the next step, for you to move in here, or to the apartment in New York City when we're in town, for us to build a life together. The three of us." The tears Jennifer had been holding back finally spilled over. "Yes," she answered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes to all of it. To the next step, to building a life together." They sealed the moment with a deep kiss, full of promises for the future. "There's one more thing," Brandon said, when they pulled apart. "I talked to Ethan about this yesterday." "And what did he think?" Brandon's smile widened. "He asked what took me so long. Apparently, in his little mind, you've been part of the family for months." Jennifer laughed, wiping her tears. "He's really something, isn't he?" "Yes, he is, and he has good taste, just like his dad." That night, Ethan insisted Jennifer read his bedtime story, a new book about a family of sea turtles. When she finished, the boy surprised her with a question. "Jen, if you're going to live with us, can I call you something else?" "What other name, sweetheart?" she asked curiously. "I don't know yet," he replied thoughtfully. "Not Mom, because Mom is already Mom, even if she's in heaven, but something special, just for us." Touched by the boy's sensitivity, Jennifer gently stroked his hair. "We can think of a special name together. There's no rush." Okay, he agreed, already yawning with sleepiness. Good night, Jen. For now, it's just Jen. Good night, little one, she answered, kissing his forehead. The housewarming the next day was an absolute success. Friends and family marveled at the transformation of the space, especially the gardens that seemed to have always been part of the landscape, blending so naturally into the surroundings. Hannah, watching her brother and Jennifer welcoming guests, like a perfectly synchronized couple, approached Brandon during a quiet moment. You look happy, she remarked. Genuinely happy. I am, he confirmed. More than I thought possible again. She's special, Bran. Exactly what you and Ethan needed. Not just what we needed, he corrected, but what we deserved too. In another corner of the garden, Ms. Josephine, who had practically raised Brandon after his mother's early passing, chatted animatedly with Jennifer about Vermont recipes. Sweetheart, you brought life back to this family, the elderly woman said, holding Jennifer's hands in hers. I see it in my boy's eyes and little Ethan's. It's a blessing. Thank you, Ms. Josephine. They brought life to me too. The party lasted until dusk, with Ethan proudly giving tours of his treehouse to all the children present. When the last guest left, only the closest family remained: Brandon, Ethan, Jennifer, and Hannah. Sitting on the porch under the first stars of the night, savoring the last pieces of cake and glasses of champagne, juice for Ethan, there was a palpable feeling of a new beginning, of a circle completing itself. It was Ethan who put into words what everyone felt, with the direct honesty of children. Now our family is complete again, right, Dad? Yes, son, Brandon answered, looking tenderly at Jennifer and Hannah. Complete in a new and special way. As the night deepened over the Montauk shore, the newly formed little family stayed together under the stars. The past honored, the present embraced, and the future awaited with open hearts. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, the following weeks brought gradual but meaningful changes. Jennifer began transferring her belongings to the beach house and Brandon's apartment in New York City, a process she chose to do slowly, respecting the existing spaces and memories. One particularly busy afternoon, while packing in her old apartment, she received an unexpected call. Miss Brooks, this is Chief Carter from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Hello, Chief. Is something wrong? Just an update I thought might interest you and Mr. Mitchell. The Drummonds. Trial concluded yesterday. Jennifer sat down, the box of books she was organizing momentarily forgotten. And the outcome? Victor Collins was sentenced to 12 years for fraud, corruption, and criminal conspiracy. Vanessa received an 8-year sentence with a recommendation for ongoing psychological evaluation. I see, Jennifer replied, complex emotions washing over her. There was no joy in others' misfortune, even someone like Vanessa, but there was certainly relief in knowing justice had been served. Thank you for letting me know, Chief. There's one more thing, Carter continued. During the trial, it came to light that Vanessa had hired private investigators to follow Mr. Mitchell and his son in the months leading up to the engagement. Her obsession ran even deeper than we initially imagined. After hanging up, Jennifer immediately called Brandon, who was at the office. I just got the news, she said. The Collins family was convicted. There was a moment of silence on the other end before Brandon responded, I'm not entirely sure how I feel about this. Relief, certainly, but also a strange sadness for the complete loss of potential. Vanessa is an intelligent woman. Victor is a skilled businessman. What could they have achieved if they'd channeled that energy into something constructive instead of destructive? That's a compassionate thought, Jennifer observed, admiring once again Brandon's ability to see beyond the anger that would have been justified. Many would simply be celebrating. I think I've moved past the anger. Now, I mostly feel gratitude for what I've learned from this whole experience. If it weren't for Vanessa, as disturbing as her influence was, we might never have met. There's always light in the darkest situations, if we know where to look, Jennifer agreed. That evening, when Brandon told Ethan that the bad people, who had tried to hurt the family were now where they couldn't harm anyone anymore, the boy asked a surprising question. "Do they have families too, Daddy? Who takes care of them now?" The innocence and compassion in the question deeply moved Brandon. "I don't know, son. I hope they have someone. Everyone deserves to have someone who cares. Even bad people. Especially people who do wrong things," Brandon replied, choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes it's because they don't have anyone to love them that they end up making bad choices." Ethan considered this seriously, with that focused expression that reminded Brandon so much of Catherine. "Then we're really lucky, aren't we? To have each other and Aunt Hannah and now Jen too." "Yes, son, we're incredibly lucky." By October, a comfortable routine had settled in. During the week, they stayed at the apartment in New York City with Ethan attending school and Brandon managing Mitchell Properties, now fully recovered from the crisis and expanding into new markets. Jennifer divided her time between overseeing the completion of the corporate gardens and developing projects for other clients who had sought her out after seeing her work at Mitchell's headquarters. Weekends were sacred, always spent in Montauk, always the three of them together, sometimes joined by Hannah or close friends. Ethan thrived in this new arrangement, his naturally optimistic personality complemented by an emotional security only a loving, stable family could provide. It was during one of these weekends that Ethan finally announced his decision about the special name for Jennifer. "I've decided," he declared solemnly during breakfast on the porch, watching the hummingbirds that frequented the feeders Jennifer had set up. "I want to call Jen Mom J." "Mom J," Jennifer repeated, curious about the origin. "It's a mix," the boy explained proudly. "Mom from Heart Mom and J from Jennifer." Brandon and Jennifer exchanged emotional glances. The boy's sensitivity in finding a way to honor Jennifer's special place in his life without diminishing Catherine's importance was extraordinary. "I'd love to be your Mom J," Jennifer replied, her voice thick with emotion. "It's the most beautiful name anyone's ever given me." Ethan smiled, satisfied, before turning his attention back to the honey-covered pancakes in front of him. For him, the matter was settled with the simplicity only children can achieve. As the year drew to a close, the third anniversary of Catherine's passing approached, a date that had always been particularly difficult for Brandon and Ethan. In previous years, they spent the day quietly, visiting the cemetery and then staying home, reminiscing about special moments through photos and stories. This year, however, Jennifer suggested a different approach. What if, besides honoring her memory at the cemetery, we did something Catherine loved, a celebration of her life, not just a remembrance of her passing? Brandon considered the suggestion. She adored beach picnics. No matter the season, she always found a way to make them memorable. "Then that's what we'll do," Jennifer decided. "A special picnic with all her favorite foods." On the day itself, after an emotional but peaceful visit to the cemetery, they drove to a secluded beach near their home in Montauk. Jennifer had meticulously prepared a basket with everything Brandon had mentioned: cucumber and cream cheese sandwiches, fresh strawberries, homemade lemonade, and the almond-topped chocolate cake that had been Catherine's specialty. Sitting on the checkered blanket with the sound of waves as their soundtrack, Brandon began telling Ethan stories about his mother that the boy might not remember, how she insisted on dancing in the rain, how she talked to her plants while watering them, how she sang off-key in the shower every morning. Instead of tears, there were smiles. Instead of heavy silence, there was laughter. Jennifer chimed in occasionally, asking questions that sparked more memories, more stories, contributing to the celebration, without ever trying to take a place that wasn't hers. As the sun began to set, Ethan ran to the water's edge, mesmerized by the colors reflecting on the waves. "Thank you," Brandon said, holding Jennifer's hand, "for today, for understanding, for making this date something we can live through, without drowning in sadness." "Catherine will always be part of you," she replied, "as she should be. I'm just here to help carry the love, not replace it." That afternoon marked a subtle but profound shift. The pain of losing Catherine would never fully disappear, nor should it, but it had transformed into something they could carry more lightly, something that coexisted peacefully with the new happiness they'd found. As Christmas approached, Brandon faced an important decision. He had bought a ring, a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds, elegant but not flashy, exactly the style he knew Jennifer would love. The question now was when and how to propose. It was Hannah who offered the perfect suggestion, the company Christmas party. It's the ideal setting, formal but not overly so, with people who matter to both of you, and symbolically it represents a fresh start for the new year. Wouldn't it be too public? Brandon hesitated. Jennifer is quite private. I've known that woman for less than a year, and even I'm certain she'd say yes if you proposed in the middle of a construction site, Hannah teased. But yes, I understand your concern. Maybe you can have a private moment during the party. The terrace garden she designed will be stunning with the Christmas lights. The idea was perfect. And so, on the night of Mitchell Properties' Christmas party, Brandon was more nervous than before any investor pitch or board meeting. The event was held annually on the corporate headquarters terrace, and this year held special meaning. Besides celebrating Christmas, it also marked the official completion of Jennifer's project, which had transformed the space into a breathtaking urban garden recently awarded for its sustainability innovation. Jennifer was radiant that evening, wearing a simple yet elegant red dress, receiving genuine compliments from executives who had initially doubted her unconventional concepts for corporate spaces. Ethan, dressed in a miniature suit that made him look even more adorable, circulated through the party like a little host, charming employees and business partners with his natural ease. At midnight, as planned with Hannah, who was tasked with distracting Ethan for a few minutes, Brandon led Jennifer to a more secluded corner of the terrace, a pergola covered in jasmine that she had specifically designed as an oasis of serenity amid the urban setting. "It's incredible what you've created here," Brandon remarked, looking around at the delicate lights intertwined with the plants, creating an almost magical atmosphere. "You've completely transformed not just this space, but the experience of everyone who works in the building." "Thank you," Jennifer smiled. "It was a special project for me for many reasons." "For me, too," Brandon said, taking her hands. "Because this is where we really began, wasn't it? When you presented that first proposal to the committee, remember? How could I forget? I was so nervous I almost spilled coffee on the model. I never told you, but that day when you passionately explained how the vertical gardens would work, I had an absolute certainty." "What certainty?" she asked, intrigued. "That I was falling in love with you. Not just for your professional skill or beauty, but for your passion, your authenticity, your kindness." Jennifer's eyes shimmered with restrained emotion. "Brandon, these past months," he continued, "you've brought so much into my life, into Ethan's life. Not just love, but stability, joy, a sense of possibility I'd forgotten existed." Slowly, he pulled a small blue velvet box from his pocket and knelt before her. "Jennifer Brooks, would you do me the honor of marrying me? Of making official what we three already know, that we're a family?" Tears of happiness streamed freely down Jennifer's face as she looked from the ring to the man kneeling before her. "Yes," she answered, her voice choked but firm. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." When Brandon slid the ring onto her finger and stood to kiss her, they were interrupted by a small cry of joy. Ethan, who had apparently slipped away from Hannah's watch, came running toward them. "Did she say yes?" He asked eagerly. "Is Mom J officially going to be part of our family?" "Yes, champ," Brandon confirmed, lifting his son into his arms. "If that's okay with you." "Finally!" the boy exclaimed to the adults' amusement. "Can I tell Aunt Hannah, and Miss Josephine, and Brave?" "You can tell anyone you want," Jennifer laughed, pulling him into a three-way hug. "I'm so happy to officially be part of this family." The news spread quickly through the party, resulting in a wave of heartfelt congratulations. The longtime employees of Mitchell Properties, who had witnessed Brandon's pain after Catherine's passing, seemed particularly moved to see him find love again. Ruth Vanderbilt, the senior advisor, approached the couple with a glass of champagne. "When Catherine left us," she said with the frankness her age allowed, "many of us feared you'd never find happiness again, Brandon. Your heart seemed completely closed off except to Ethan. Seeing you like this now, engaged again, clearly in love, is a gift to everyone who cares about you." "Thank you, Ruth," Brandon replied, genuinely touched. "It took me a while to understand that the heart can expand, not just replace." "The lesson many never learn," the woman observed wisely before turning to Jennifer. "You've won over not just a man and a boy, but an entire community that loves them. Welcome, officially, to the Mitchell family." As the evening wore on, Ethan eventually dozed off on a makeshift sofa in a quiet corner, exhausted from all the excitement. Brandon and Jennifer stayed at the party a little longer, accepting congratulations and sharing their joy, before finally deciding it was time to take the little one home. Back at the apartment, after tucking a sleeping Ethan into bed, they sat on the balcony with glasses of wine, admiring the city lights and the ring now sparkling on Jennifer's finger. "When I was preparing the terrace garden," she mused, "there was one particularly challenging flower bed. The soil was poor, compacted from years of neglect. Everyone told me to just cover it with concrete and place pots on top. It would have been easier, faster. But you didn't," Brandon remarked. "No, instead I spent weeks restoring that soil, adding nutrients, loosening it, treating it with patience. Today it's the most vibrant bed in the entire garden." "There's a metaphor there, isn't there?" Brandon smiled. "Yes," Jennifer confirmed, intertwining her fingers with his, "about how sometimes what seems beyond repair, given the right care, the right time, and the right love, can not only survive but flourish in ways no one thought possible. Like a widowed man and his 5-year-old son," Brandon suggested softly. "Like all of us in different ways," she added. "We all carry our scars, our compacted soil. The beauty lies in how we choose to treat them, whether we cover them up and pretend they don't exist or patiently work to turn them into something fertile again." They fell silent for a moment, gazing at the city lights and the future unfolding before them, not perfect, certainly, but rich with possibilities, like a well-planned garden, with room for growth, seasonal changes, and the unexpected beauty that appears when least expected. "I think we should get married in the spring," Brandon suggested. "In the garden at the beach house when the blooms you planned are at their peak." "That would be perfect," Jennifer agreed. "A celebration of new beginnings in the season of new beginnings." Christmas arrived with the cheerful calm of a family that had found its balance. Ethan woke at dawn as expected, rushing to the tree with the universal excitement of children on that day. His favorite gifts were a telescope from Brandon and a complete set of child-sized gardening tools from Jennifer. "So you can have your own little corner of the garden," she explained. The rest of the holiday season was spent entirely in Montauk, with frequent visits from Hannah and occasionally close friends. On New Year's Eve, a small beachside celebration, with floating lanterns released into the sea carrying wishes for the coming year, marked the official transition into this new chapter of their lives. "What did you wish for, Dad?" Ethan asked, watching the lanterns drift away over the dark waves. "I can't tell you or it won't come true," Brandon replied, winking at his son. "But it involves you and Mom Jay for sure." "My wish is for a little brother," the boy declared with his usual frankness, nearly making the adults choke on their champagne. "Ethan," Brandon exclaimed, surprised, "where did that idea come from?" "From Joey at my school. He got a little brother and said it's cool because he has someone to play with all the time, and to share the blame when they break something." Jennifer couldn't hold back her laughter. "At least he's honest about the perks." "Let's take it easy, champ," Brandon smiled, ruffling his son's hair. "First the wedding, then we'll think about that, okay?" In the months that followed, wedding preparations blended into their established routine. They chose an intimate ceremony with no more than 50 guests, all genuinely close to the couple. Ethan would have the role of ring bearer, a responsibility he took extremely seriously, practicing his solemn walk down the aisle, which was actually a flower-lined path in the beach house garden, almost daily. April arrived with perfect weather for an outdoor ceremony. Clear skies, mild temperatures, and Jennifer's garden at its most vibrant, just as planned. On the morning of the big day, while Jennifer got ready with Hannah's help in one room, Brandon helped Ethan with his bow tie in the opposite room. "Nervous, Dad?" the boy asked, watching his father closely. "A little," Brandon admitted. It's Normal. Why? Mum J loves you and you love her. It's simple. Brandon smiled at the child's flawless logic. You're right, as always. It really is simple when you put it that way. When the ceremony finally began, the guests were already seated in chairs arranged in a circle around a pergola specially built for the occasion. Ethan surprised everyone by performing his role with a seriousness and elegance impressive for a 6-year-old. The rings, carried on a small cushion made from fabric of Catherine's wedding dress, Hannah's idea, tearfully approved by Jennifer, arrived perfectly at the altar. Brandon waited under the pergola as the music started, and everyone turned to see Jennifer walking through the garden. Her dress, in a soft ivory shade, was simple yet elegant, complemented by a bouquet of wildflowers picked from that very garden that morning. The vows they exchanged were written by themselves, heartfelt words about finding love when least expected, about building a family that honored the past while embracing the future, about commitment, not just to each other, but to Ethan and to Catherine's ever-respected memory. There wasn't a dry eye among the guests when, after the ring exchange, the officiant announced, "By the authority vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Brandon, you may kiss the bride." As they kissed, sealing their union, Ethan couldn't contain his excitement and ran to hug them both, turning the moment into a family embrace that drew smiles and emotional applause from everyone. The celebration that followed was exactly as they'd envisioned, relaxed, joyful, with delicious food, great music, and above all, the feeling of being surrounded only by people who truly cared for them. Hannah gave a touching toast, celebrating not just the couple's love, but also the resilience and capacity for new beginnings they'd both shown in their journeys. As night fell and the lanterns Jennifer had strategically placed lit up the garden with a magical glow, Brandon found a quiet moment alone with his now wife, while Ethan ran between guests, clearly the most enthusiastic host of the party. "Happy?" he asked, pulling her close. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Jennifer answered, resting her head on his shoulder. "And you?" "Complete," Brandon said simply, like a part of me that was asleep has finally woken up. They watched Ethan proudly showing his treehouse to some of the young guests. "He's so happy," Jennifer remarked, "so secure." "Thanks to you in large part," Brandon acknowledged. "You didn't just bring me back to life, you gave him the emotional security I'd been struggling to provide alone." "The three of us healed each other in different ways," Jennifer reflected. "That's how the best families work, isn't it? Each filling the other's needs, each bringing their own strengths to the whole." Across the garden, Hannah watched them with a satisfied smile. As the sister who had stood by Brandon during his darkest days after Catherine's loss, witnessing this transformation held deep meaning. The brother she feared would never genuinely smile again now radiated quiet happiness beside his new wife. Later that evening, when most guests had left and Ethan finally succumbed to exhaustion, falling asleep in his aunt's arms, Brandon and Jennifer walked hand in hand toward the beach. The full moon reflected on the calm sea, casting a silver path over the gentle waves. "You know what's funny?" Brandon remarked as they walked barefoot in the sand. "It all started with a whisper in my ear." "How so?" Jennifer asked, curious. "Ethan, on the day of the wedding that almost happened, he pulled me aside and whispered that he'd heard Vanessa talking on the phone, that she planned to send him away after we married. That one little moment, that brave whisper changed everything. The wisdom and courage of children never cease to amaze me." Jennifer smiled. "That small act of bravery saved all of you." "And brought us to you," Brandon finished, stopping to kiss her under the moonlight. "Which makes me think maybe we should consider his request for a little brother sooner than we planned." Jennifer laughed, blushing slightly. "I think that's a conversation for another night. We have a whole lifetime ahead of us, don't we?" "Yes," Brandon agreed, gazing at the horizon where sky and sea blurred into one. "A whole lifetime. To build together, one day at a time." And so, in the quiet of that beach beneath a starry sky with the soft sound of waves as their soundtrack, they reaffirmed their commitment, not just as husband and wife, but as architects of a family rebuilt. From the ashes of pain, nurtured with patience, watered with understanding and now flourishing fully under the sun of a new day. In the years that followed, life brought its own surprises and challenges. Ethan's wish was granted about a year after the wedding, with the birth of Sophie, a girl with eyes as expressive as her brother's. Mitchell Properties expanded under Brandon's visionary leadership, now with a division dedicated to sustainable ventures inspired by Jennifer's work. The landscape architect, in turn, gained national recognition for her innovative projects, eventually opening her own environmental consulting firm. Vanessa Collins, after serving her sentence, left the country, seemingly determined to rebuild her life far from the scandals that had defined her. Michael, who repaid his debt to society through community service and financial restitution, settled in a small town, eventually reconciling partially with Brandon, not enough to restore lost trust, but enough for civil interactions during rare family gatherings. Ethan grew into a balanced, compassionate young man, carrying the best qualities of both his father and the two women who shaped his life. His birth mother, whose memory was kept alive through stories and traditions, and the stepmother who loved him as her own. As he himself once said at age 12 in a school essay about family, "I'm lucky to have two mothers, one who gave me life and watches over me from heaven, and another who teaches me every day how to live it fully here on earth." The beach. House in Montauk became the center of family life, with Jennifer's gardens evolving and transforming over the years, just like the family that found refuge in them. Ethan's treehouse was eventually shared with Sophie and later renovated for the next generation of children to come. One particular afternoon, nearly 2 decades after the nearly disastrous marriage to Vanessa, Brandon stood on the deck of the house, watching his family gathered in the garden. Ethan, now a young man studying architecture, Sophie in her teens, Hannah with her now graying hair but the same lively spirit, and Jennifer, as beautiful as the day he met her, working on one of her flower beds with the same passion as always. It was in that moment he truly understood the extent of the journey they had taken. From a widowed man about to make the mistake of marrying someone who didn't truly love him, to this moment of fulfillment and peace, surrounded by people who represented not just love but also growth, resilience, and the beauty that can blossom even in the most unlikely soil. And it had all started with that simple moment, a 5-year-old boy mustering all his courage to whisper in his father's ear the words that would change all their fates. "Daddy, I heard her on the phone. She said she's going to send me to Grandma's house after the wedding." Sometimes, Brandon reflected as he joined his family in the garden, the biggest changes in life begin with the smallest acts of bravery. And sometimes the most beautiful new beginnings come exactly when we think all is lost. The end. Dear listener, has this journey of love, betrayal, and new beginnings touched your heart? Share your thoughts in the comments. Did Brandon make the right choice in trusting Ethan? Subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt stories that show how life always gives us a second chance.